38,000 Americans over the age of 65 died last year from a single cause. Not from their hearts giving out, not from any disease with a long Latin name, not from a crash on the highway. They died from falling down. Just that. A foot catches on the edge of a rug, or a heel slips off the lip of a curb, and the floor comes up, and that is the end of a whole life. Now, if you asked almost any doctor in the country what an older person should do to keep that from happening, to stay strong and steady on their feet, you would hear the same three words come back at you again and again. Go for walks. Walk more. Walk every day. And I want to tell you something right at the start before I say anything else, so there is no confusion about where I stand. That advice is good advice. Walking is genuinely, honestly good for you. It helps your heart. It helps the sugar in your blood behave itself. It lifts your mood on a gray afternoon better than most things people try. If you came to me and asked, should I take a walk today, I would say yes, absolutely, go, do not even think about it. So here is a picture I want you to hold in your mind. It is 6 in the morning. Somewhere a retired school teacher is sitting on the edge of the bed. She is 73 years old. She has been doing this for years now. She reaches down and she laces up a pair of soft white sneakers, the kind with the thick cushioned sole, and she pulls the laces snug and she goes out into the cool blue light before the sun is really up, and she walks a mile, maybe two, every single morning. She is doing exactly what she was told. She is doing the thing the whole world agrees is the right answer. And she believes in it, and I believe in it too, and for most of this talk I am going to believe in it right alongside her. But I am going to tell you now, quietly, so we do not lose it later, that there is a gap. There is a specific piece of her leg, a particular kind of living tissue down in the muscle, that aging goes after harder than anything else after the age of 70. And that morning walk, that beautiful, faithful morning walk, cannot reach it. Not because she is doing it wrong. Not because she needs to walk faster or farther. There is a structural reason, a reason built into the physics of what walking actually is, that puts this one thing forever out of reach of that exercise. And closing the gap, filling in the part the walk leaves untouched, does not take a gym. It does not take a young trainer shouting at you. It does not even take 20 minutes. It takes about 5. And to understand why 5 minutes of the right thing can do what a whole hour of the wrong thing cannot, we have to take the whole business apart, slowly, the way you would take apart a clock you did not trust, and look at every piece. But not yet. Let us not rush to the answer, because the honest way to do this, the only fair way, is to first make the case for walking as strongly as I possibly can. I want you to feel for a while that the walking answer is not just good, but complete. That there is nothing missing, because that is how it feels to almost everyone, including a lot of very smart people, and if I hand you the punchline in the first 2 minutes, you will not really believe it. You have to feel the ground first before you feel it move. So let us think about what walking actually is. Really think about it, the way a child thinks about something for the first time before anybody has told them the answer. What is a step? You are standing there upright, this tall, wobbly stack of bones balanced on 2 small feet. And to take a step, you have to do something genuinely a little bit crazy. You have to fall. You lean forward, and for a moment you're actually falling toward the ground, and then one leg swings out ahead of you and catches you just in time and plants down, and now you are balanced again on the new foot. And then you do it again, and again. A walk is nothing but a long, controlled, repeated falling, caught over and over by a leg that swings out to save you. When you say it that way, it sounds like the most dangerous thing in the world. And yet a person can do it for an hour and think about their grocery list the whole time and never come close to falling. That is a marvel. And we will come back to why it is a marvel. Now, when that school teacher walks her morning mile, what is she asking her legs to do down at the smallest level, down inside the muscle itself? She is asking for a steady, gentle, patient kind of effort. Not much force at any one moment. Just a little push, again and again and again. Thousands of times, without stopping, without tiring, for 20 or 30 minutes. That is the job. And it turns out that the body has a special crew of workers built exactly for that kind of job. We will meet them properly in a while, and we will meet the other crew too. The one she is not calling on, and that difference between the two crews is going to be the whole story. But hold that thought lightly for now. Here is what I want you to sit with first. Walking is not nothing. I keep saying that because it is true, and because the whole argument I am building depends on me being fair. When you take people, older people, people in their 60s and 70s and 80s, and you get them moving, you can measure the good it does. There is a simple test the doctors use. They ask a person to walk for 6 minutes and they measure how far they got. It is called, very cleverly, the 6-minute walk test. And when you give people the right kind of exercise, that distance goes up. You can measure it in meters. It is real. So walking and the fitness that lets you walk, these are real measurable things, not vague feelings of wellness. Keep that in your pocket. We are going to need it later, and when we need it, it is going to do something you do not expect. And there is more on walking's side of the ledger, and I am going to lay it all out, generously, because I want the case to feel airtight before I lay a finger on it. There are careful studies, the good kind, where they take people and they split them into groups and they follow them for a year, and the walking group gets better at walking, measurably, on the clock. There are big population surveys covering thousands of people that tie walking to fewer of exactly the things we are afraid of. So this is not folk wisdom. This is not your aunt telling you to bundle up. This is the real machinery of medicine pointing with a steady hand at walking and saying that. Do that. And on top of all that, there is a plain, practical fact that makes walking almost impossible to argue with. Most older people are not going to lift heavy weights. They just are not. If you look at how many older adults in this country actually do the kind of strength work that the official guidelines recommend, twice a week, every week, the number is small, fewer than 1 in 5. So walking is the thing people will actually do. It is free. It needs no equipment. You do not have to learn anything. You just open the door and go. And an exercise that people will actually do beats a perfect exercise that sits in a pamphlet nobody reads. That is not a small point. That is maybe the strongest point of all. So there it is. That is the case for walking, and I have made it as well as I know how, and I want you to notice that I have not lied to you once. Every piece of it is true. The heart, the blood sugar, the mood, the measurable distance on the 6-minute test, the studies that follow people for a year, the plain fact that it is the one thing people will actually stick with. If you stopped the talk right here, you would walk away, you would lace up your soft white sneakers tomorrow at 6 in the morning, and you would feel that you had the whole answer in your hands, and you would be mostly right. Mostly. That word is going to keep me up at night. Because sitting off to the side of everything I just told you, quiet, patient, waiting, is that number. 38,000 people, and 1 in 4 older adults falling every single year. 14 million falls. And I have just spent all this time telling you that the thing everyone does, the thing that works, the thing I believe in, is out there being done by millions of faithful people every morning. So if it is working, if the case is really as complete as it feels, then I have to ask a question that I do not yet know how to answer. Where on earth is that number coming from? Let us not touch it yet. Let us just let it sit there in the corner, and let us go look very slowly and very carefully at what is actually happening inside a leg. So picture a foot. Just one foot, bare, hanging in the air for a moment at the top of a stride, and then coming down onto a sidewalk. It looks like nothing. A child does it 10,000 times a day without a single thought. But underneath that soft, thoughtless motion there is a machine of astonishing cleverness. And I want to take it apart the way you would take apart an old clock on a kitchen table, laying each piece out where you can see it. When the heel touches down, the leg does not simply hold still like a post. It gives, just a little. The ankle rolls forward, the knee bends a hair, The whole body is falling and the leg is catching it and passing it along. And to do that catching, muscles all up and down the leg are pulling, gently, in a long steady hum. The calf, the big muscle in the back of the thigh, the one in the front of the thigh, the ones deep in the hip. None of them yank. None of them explode. They just tighten in a smooth, patient way, over and over, one foot then the other, for as long as you care to keep walking. You could walk to the corner. You could walk for an hour. Some people walk for half a day. And the muscles do not complain, because this kind of work is exactly the kind they were built to do all day long. Now that is the part I want you to hold on to, because it is the whole secret and nobody ever says it out loud. Walking is easy work done for a long time. It is low and slow and endless. And your body has a special set of tools for low and slow and endless, and it saves them for precisely this. If I want to understand why the walking gospel is only mostly the answer, I have to go down, past the skin, past the muscle you can see, all the way to the little threads the muscle's made of. Because it turns out your leg is not one thing pulling. It is millions of tiny things pulling, and they are not all the same kind of thing. Let me put a single one of those threads under a glass. We call it a fiber, and a muscle is a bundle of them the way a rope is a bundle of strands. And when the anatomists looked closely, long before my time, they noticed that the strands came in more than one flavor. Some of them were a deep red, rich with blood, packed with tiny furnaces that burn oxygen. Those are the slow ones. We call them the slow fibers, the endurance fibers, and they are the marathon runners of the leg. They contract gently. They do not tire. You can lean on them for hours, and they just keep going, sipping oxygen, humming along. When you walk to the corner at 6 in the morning, these are the fibers doing the job, nearly all of it. And then, threaded right in among them, are the other kind, paler, faster, built completely differently. These are the fast fibers, and they are not marathon runners at all. They are the ones you call on when a child darts into the street and you lunge to grab a coat, when a plate slips off the counter and your hand snaps out before you have even decided to move, when your foot catches the edge of a rug and for a quarter of a second your whole body has to do something violent and immediate to keep you off the floor. Those fibers can pull with tremendous force, and they can do it fast, faster than thought. But they pay for it. They tire in seconds. They cannot hum along all day. They are the sprinters, and a sprinter cannot sprint to the corner store and back. He gives you everything in a few seconds, and then he is done. So already you can feel the shape of the trouble coming, can you not? Two armies in one leg, one of them slow and patient and tireless, one of them fast and strong and quickly spent. And walking, that lovely, gentle, endless thing, calls upon the slow army and only the slow army. It never once needs the fast one. Why would it? There is no emergency in a walk. There is nothing to catch, nothing to lunge for, no plate falling off the counter. A walk is the most peaceful thing a leg can do, and peace is exactly what the fast fibers are not for. Hold that thought. Do not close it yet. Because here is where I have to be honest with you and tell you that walking is not nothing. I have heard people, once they learn this fiber business, wave their hands and say, "Oh, walking is useless then, throw it out." No, that is sloppy, and I will not stand for sloppy. Walking is measurable, real, honest exercise, and I can prove it with a ruler. There is a test the doctors use. They call it the 6-minute walk. It is exactly what it sounds like. They mark off a hallway, they say go, and they see how far you can walk in 6 minutes. And it is a genuine measure of how fit an older person is, how far they can carry themselves before the tank runs dry. Now, when researchers gathered up 22 separate careful studies, more than 3,600 people between them, folks with average ages running from the low 60s all the way up to the late 80s, and they had these people do resistance work, actual strengthening, and then measured that 6-minute walk again, the distance went up. On average by about 16 meters further in the same 6 minutes. That is more than a bus length, gained back in people who were already old. Now sit with what that little number is quietly telling you, because it is sneaky. They made people stronger and the people walked better. not the other way around. And their walking speed, the plain everyday pace at which they got around, ticked up too by about 5/100ths of a meter every second. That sounds like nothing. It is not nothing. Across a street, across a lifetime of crossings, that is the difference between beating the light and not. So walking is a thing you can measure, and it responds to training, and that means it matters. I will not throw it out. Anyone who tells you to throw out walking has stopped thinking one step too soon. But you see the crack forming, do you not? If getting stronger makes the walking better, then strength is sitting underneath the walking, holding it up like the foundation under a house. And nobody ever tells the retired schoolteacher lacing up her sneakers at 6 in the morning to go pour a foundation. They just tell her to walk, as though the walking were the whole house, when it may only be the paint. Let me slow this down even more, because I do not want to rush past the most beautiful part. When you were young, both armies in your leg were full. The slow fibers, plentiful. The fast fibers, plentiful too, thick and ready, standing at attention for any emergency. If you tripped at 25, the fast fibers fired, your leg shot out, you caught yourself, you laughed about it, you kept walking. You never even filed it as an event. It was over before you were scared. But something happens across the decades, and it does not happen evenly. That is the whole crux of it. It does not happen evenly. If the two armies faded at the same rate hand in hand, we would have a simpler and kinder story. They do not. The slow army, the patient one, the one you use every single day just by living, by standing, by walking to the corner, it holds on remarkably well. You keep it in shape without trying, because you are always, quietly, using it. The fast army is another matter entirely. Because when is the last time you truly needed it? When is the last time a person of 70 sprinted, or lifted something at the very edge of what they could lift, or lunged with everything they had? For most gentle, sensible, walking lives, the answer is years, maybe longer. And the body is ruthlessly practical. It is a good housekeeper. It does not pay to keep a soldier fed and armed if that soldier is never called to fight, so it lets them go. Quietly, without a memo. The fast fibers, the very ones that catch you when you fall, the strong ones, the quick ones, thin out and wither, precisely because the peaceful walking life never once asks them to prove they are still needed. And now maybe you can feel that number in the corner starting to stir, the 38,000, the 14 million. Because I have just described, in the plainest terms I can find, a leg that walks beautifully and can no longer catch itself. A leg with a full slow army and a starving fast one. A person who can stroll for an hour and yet cannot, in the 1/4 of 1 second that matters, produce the sudden violent force that keeps them off the ground. We have not proven it yet. I am only pointing at it. But do you see how the walking gospel and the falling epidemic, which seem to have nothing to do with each other, might be two views of the very same leg, the thing that works and the thing that fails, living in the same muscle made of the same threads, told apart only by which threads you ever bothered to use. So let me stop pointing and let me show you. Because a good idea that only sounds nice is worth very little. What we want is somebody who went and did the hard, boring, patient work of testing it on real people over real years and writing down what actually happened. And such a thing exists. It was done in Copenhagen, at a hospital there, at the university, and the results were gathered up and reported in the year 2024. Here is what they did, and I want you to notice how simple and how honest the design is. They took 451 people, all of them recently retired, right at that tender age where the fast army is quietly packing its bags. And they split them into 3 groups, more or less by the flip of a coin, which is the whole trick of a good experiment. You do not let the eager ones pick the hard program and the tired ones pick the easy one, because then you learn nothing. You let chance decide, so the groups start out the same, and any difference at the end must come from what you did to them, not from who they already were. The first group did heavy resistance training. Real load, weight that made the muscles strain and complain, the kind of effort that speaks to the fast fibers in a language they cannot ignore. The second group did moderate exercise, the pleasant middle, the sort of thing most sensible people would call plenty. And the third group did nothing in particular. They went on living as they lived, which for most of us means walking, gardening, climbing the odd stair, the ordinary motion of an ordinary day. They ran the training for 1 year, just 1 year of effort. And then, and this is the part that makes the study worth its salt, they let everybody go and they waited. They followed all three groups for 4 years in total. So you have 1 year of doing the thing, and then 3 more years of simply watching to see what lasted. Because anyone can get stronger for a month. The question that actually matters when you are 70 is not can you gain, it is can you hold. Does the ground you win stay won, or does it wash back out to sea the moment you stop pushing? Now the people in this study, at the end, averaged 71 years of age, and a little over 60% of them were women, which matters, because the fast fiber story and the falling story both fall heaviest on women, and it is good when the study looks like the people it is meant to help. Here is the number. They measured the strength of the leg, the quiet, unglamorous, honest measure of how hard the muscle can pull. At the start, the heavy training group came in at about 150 Newton meters. You do not need to know exactly what a Newton meter is. Think of it as a fair ruler for how much twist, how much turning force the leg can make. 150 of them at the beginning, and 4 years later, 3 full years after they had stopped training, that same group measured about 151. Sit with that for a moment in the dark and let it be as strange as it really is. They did not decline. After 4 years of getting older, in the decade of life where getting weaker is supposed to be as certain as the tide, this group ended exactly where they started. A hair stronger if you want to be precise about it, though I would not lean too hard on that hair. The honest reading is that they held the line. Time pushed, and they did not give ground. And the other two groups, the moderate exercises, the pleasant middle, the sensible plenty, and the group that simply lived their ordinary walking life. Both of them declined, measurably, meaningfully, in the direction that time always pushes when nothing pushes back. The gentle life and the moderate life ended weaker than they began. Only the group that had spoken to the fast fibers in their own loud language kept what they had. I want to be careful here because I have just told you something that sounds like a sermon, and I promised you I would not preach. So let me be exact about what this does and does not prove. It does not prove that walking is bad. Walking is not bad. It does not prove that the moderate group wasted their time, and it does not prove that everyone must go and lift heavy iron. What it proves, on real people over real years, is a single stubborn fact. The thing that held the leg together across the crossing of 4 years was load, was effort that reached past the comfortable, was, in plain words, the one signal that the slow, peaceful walking life never sends. And the man who led that work said something about why, and I find it beautiful, because it takes us right back down to where we have been standing all along, at the level of the thread and the wire. He said the weight training seemed to strengthen the connection between the motor neurons and the muscles. The connection, not just the muscle. The connection, the wire between them. Now I have to tell you what that wire is, because it is the piece we have been circling without naming, and once you see it, half the mystery dissolves. Your muscle does not decide anything. It is a magnificent, obedient, stupid engine, and it waits. It waits for a signal, and the signal comes down a long, thin living cable from your spinal cord from a cell called a motor neuron. One motor neuron reaches down and takes charge of a whole bundle of muscle fibers like a foreman with a crew. When the foreman shouts, the whole crew pulls at once. That foreman and its crew together we call a motor unit, and your leg is nothing but thousands of these little teams waiting for their orders. And here is the thing the walking never does. When you stroll, you only need the small teams. The little foremen, the ones in charge of the slow, patient, fatigue-resistant crews, they handle the whole job easily. They can walk you around the block, around the park, around the whole long morning, and they never have to call for help. So the big foremen, the ones commanding the huge fast crews, the ones you would need to catch yourself, They sit in the dark. Nobody calls them. Nobody sends the loud signal that wakes them up. And a foreman who is never called, over months, over years, starts to forget how to shout. The wire goes quiet. The crew, unvisited, thins out. This is what the Copenhagen man was pointing at. When you lift something genuinely heavy, when the load is real, the small teams are not enough, and your body is forced, absolutely forced, to reach up and wake the big foreman. It sends the loud signal. It fires the wire at full voltage. And a wire that fires stays alive. A connection that gets used stays strong. That is the whole secret of why load does something a stroll cannot. It is not really about the muscle being bigger. It is about the phone line to the muscle staying connected. And you can see this in more than one study, which is how you know it is not a fluke of one clever lab in one cold city. When people gather up many trials together, dozens of them, thousands of older people all told, and they add up what resistance training did, they find the leg gets stronger, yes, but they also find something quieter and lovelier. The walking itself gets better. The usual speed at which a person strolls goes up. Only a little, about 5/100ths of a meter per second, which sounds like nothing, which is about the width of your hand added to every second of your walk. But gait speed in an older person is one of those small numbers that hides a large truth, because how fast you naturally walk turns out to track with almost uncanny loyalty how well the whole machine is holding together. So look at the funny shape of what we have found. The heavy work did not just build the thing walking cannot reach. It circled back and made the walking better too. The fast army, once fed, once reconnected, lent its strength to the slow one's daily job. You strengthen the part that catches you, and as a bonus the part that carries you gets a little freer. It runs the other way though, and this is the sad asymmetry at the center of the whole story. Walk all you like, and the walking will not climb up the wire and wake the fast foreman. The gift only travels in one direction. Load pays a dividend to endurance. Endurance pays no dividend back to power. And I said I would be honest, painfully honest, even when the honesty cuts against the very point I am building. So I have to bring you now to a study that looks, at first, like it walks into this room and calls me a liar. Because there is a large body of women, very old women, some of them past 100 years of age, and somebody looked carefully at who among them was falling and who was not. And the number that came back for walking was not small. It was, in fact, larger than the number for strength. And I am not going to hide from that. I am going to walk us straight into it, slowly, and we are going to read the fine print together, in the dark, and find out whether it truly contradicts everything I have said, or whether, like so many things that look like contradictions, it is simply a deeper truth wearing a disguise. So let us step into that room together and turn on a small lamp. Here is what somebody did. They took a very large group of women, all of them old, the youngest around 75, some of them so old you could scarcely believe it, past 100. And they asked a simple bookkeeping question. In this crowd, who walks and how much, and who lifts and how much, and who among them falls? And when the tallying was done, the walkers came out looking splendid. The women who walked at least 4¼ hours in a week had a fall risk that was lower by nearly 2/3, 64% lower. And the women who did strength work at least 2 hours in a week had a fall risk lower by about 30%. So you line those two numbers up in the dark, 64 against 30, and the walking number is more than twice as large. If you stop reading right there, you would close the book and say, well, the old man has been talking for an hour and the data just knocked his hat off. Walk. Just walk. The end. But I told you we would read the fine print, and reading the fine print is the whole game in science. It is where all the honest money is made. So let us not close the book. Let us hold it closer to the lamp. The first thing I notice, and I want you to notice it with me slowly, is what kind of picture this is. This is not the Copenhagen experiment. In Copenhagen, they took people and they assigned them. They rolled the dice in effect and said, you go lift, you go do the moderate thing, you go home and do nothing. That is an experiment. You make the world do the thing and then you watch. But this study of the very old women is a different animal entirely. Nobody assigned anybody. They simply looked out over a crowd that already existed, and they wrote down what people happened to be doing and what happened to be true of them. That is a photograph, not an experiment. And a photograph can fool you in a particular way, a way so famous it has a name, though I will not bother you with the name, because the idea is what matters. Here is the idea. Ask yourself a plain question. Who, among a group of women aged 75 to 105, is actually able to walk for 4¼ hours every week? Think about it. 4¼ hours of walking week after week at that age. That is not a frail person. That is not a person whose legs are failing. The very ability to log that much walking is itself a certificate of health. The walking did not only make them steady. Being steady is part of what let them walk that much in the first place. The arrow, you see, may point both ways, and a photograph cannot tell you which way it points. The woman who is already strong, already balanced, already unafraid, goes out and walks for hours. The woman whose legs have gone quiet and whose balance has begun to wobble stays close to her chair, and she shows up in the tally as someone who does not walk much and who also falls. Did the not walking cause the falling, or did the same underlying frailty cause both? The photograph shrugs. It does not know. So the 64% is real, but it is not clean. Baked inside it is a hidden ingredient, the plain fact that walkers at that age are a self-selected club of the already capable. That does not make walking worthless. Heaven forbid. It means the number is flattering itself a little, borrowing shine from the health it merely accompanies. Now hold that thought and pick up the other number, the 30% for strength training, and read its fine print too, because it has its own. That 30% came from women doing at least 2 hours a week of strength work. And here I want to be very careful and very fair, because it would be easy for me to cheat here, and I refuse to. 2 hours a week of strength training out of this population is a smaller, rarer, and frankly stranger club than the walkers. Very few old women are lifting weights 2 hours a week, so that number is built on a thin slice, a small and unusual group, and small thin slices give you numbers that shiver and shake, that carry a lot of noise. It is a real signal. It is a weaker photograph than the walking one, built on fewer people doing a less common thing. And here is the sentence that the people who ran the study wrote more or less in their own quiet way, and it is the sentence I want you to carry out of this room. The best result was not walking alone, and it was not lifting alone. It was both. The two together did what neither did by itself. And once you have felt, really felt, the two armies living inside your leg, this is not a surprise at all. It is exactly, precisely what you would predict. Because look at what walking is doing in that photograph, honestly at its best. 4¼ hours a week is a lot of walking, and all that walking is doing genuine good. It is keeping the slow army, the tireless red endurance fibers, in fighting trim. It is keeping the heart strong and the blood moving. It is keeping the ankles and the hips used to the ordinary business of carrying a body across a room. It is keeping fear at bay, and fear, we will come to see, is half the battle in falling. All of that is worth having. I never said it wasn't. What I said, and what I still say, is that all of that walking, every minute of it, is a message sent only to the slow army. The fast army, the pale explosive fibers that fire once and hard, never gets the telegram. 4 hours of walking or 40, it makes no difference to them. They are not listening on that channel. So what does the woman who walks 4 hours a week actually have? She has a magnificent slow army and a fast army that is quietly wasting in its barracks. And most of the time, most days, in the ordinary flow of life, that is fine. The slow army handles nearly everything. Standing, strolling, carrying, climbing at a gentle pace. The fast army sits idle because life rarely calls for it, and so its slow disappearance goes unnoticed. Nobody misses a soldier they never send for. Until the one morning the rug slides or the curb comes sooner than the eye said it would, and in that quarter of a second the body screams for the fast army, screams for a single violent contraction to throw a foot out sideways and catch 200 pounds of falling human being, and the barracks are nearly empty. That is the whole tragedy in one sentence. The army you drilled every day is not the army the emergency calls. And now you can see why the two together beat either one alone, and it is a beautiful thing to see. The walking keeps the engine of daily life running, the endurance, the heart, the confidence, the ankles. It reduces the number of stumbles, in part, by keeping a person mobile and out in the world and unafraid. But when a stumble does come, and stumbles come to everyone eventually, it is the strength work, the loading, that has kept a garrison in the fast barracks ready to answer. Walking lowers how often you trip. Strength lowers how often a trip becomes a fall. They are not rivals. They are guarding two different doors. The photograph of the old women, read all the way to the bottom, does not call me a liar at all. It tells me the same thing the microscope told me, and the same thing Copenhagen told me, only in a different accent. It says the leg is two armies, and a wise person feeds both. So I withdraw nothing, but I will confess the title on the door of this lecture is a little bit of a brawler, a little too eager for a fight. Stop the long walks, it says, as if walking were the villain. Walking is not the villain. Walking is a loyal friend who simply cannot do one particular job, the job of catching you. The honest quarrel is not walking against strength. The honest quarrel is against the belief, gentle and widespread and sincerely held, that the daily walk is the whole prescription, that if you have laced up your shoes, you have done everything aging asks of you. That belief is the thing I mean to dismantle, and the old women, bless them, help me dismantle it. Because their best outcomes belong to the ones who did both. And this raises a question that has been waiting patiently in the corner of the room this whole time, and now it steps forward. If the fast army needs its own message, its own particular kind of shout to be roused from sleep, then what exactly does that shout sound like? What is the minimum you must do to make those pale fibers sit up and answer? Does it take a barbell? Does it take a gymnasium and an hour and a young man counting your repetitions? Or could it be, and here is where the story turns toward hope, could it be something almost absurdly small? Something you could do beside your own kitchen chair in the time it takes coffee to brew. Because if the fast army will answer a quiet, well-aimed call, then everything changes, and the whole grand problem of aging legs shrinks down to something a frightened, tired, ordinary person might actually be willing to do. Let us find out how loud the shout has to be. So picture the smallest possible experiment, not a laboratory, not a machine with cables and a young man in a white coat writing on a clipboard. Just a wooden chair, the kind you already own, sitting there in the kitchen with the morning light coming across the floor. You sit down in it, and then you stand up, and then you sit down again, slow and deliberate, without shoving off with your hands. 8 times, maybe 10, that is the whole thing. And I want you to notice something, because it is easy to miss. When you rise from a chair, you are not doing a gentle, rhythmic, fatigue-resistant task. You are producing a single burst of force, once, and then resetting, and then producing it again. That burst is exactly the kind of message the fast army has been waiting all these years to hear. It is short. It is sharp. It asks the big pale fibers to wake up and push, all at once, and then it lets them rest. That is the shout. It turns out the shout does not have to be a barbell loaded with iron. It has to be effortful, and it has to be brief, and your own body weight lifted against gravity out of a chair is already heavy enough to qualify. Now I find this genuinely funny, in the good way, the way nature is often funny once you finally see the trick. We spent all this worry imagining that the answer to aging legs must be something grand and punishing. A gym membership, an hour a day, a regimen, and the whole time the most powerful stimulus was hiding inside the most ordinary motion a human being performs, the motion of standing up, which you already do a dozen times a day without thinking about it. The difference is that when you do it carelessly, letting your arms and your momentum do the work, you whisper to the fast fibers. When you do it slowly, on purpose, with your legs alone carrying the load, you shout. Same chair, same body. 2 completely different conversations with your nervous system. There is a physical therapist, a doctor named Devin Trackman, who works with older people every day, and she built a little routine out of exactly this insight. 5 movements, 5 to 7 minutes. And I want to walk through them with you, slowly, the way I would walk through any good physics problem, asking of each one, what is this actually doing down at the level of the fiber and the wire? Because none of these 5 things is random. Each one is aimed at a specific weakness that the years install in you. The first is the one we just met, the sit to stand, 8 to 10 times up and down out of the chair. And what it targets is the quadriceps, the big muscle on the front of the thigh, and the glutes, the muscle you sit on, which together are the largest muscles in the whole lower half of your body. They are also, and this is the cruel part, exactly the muscles that aging erodes fastest, because they are rich in that fast twitch tissue we have been chasing. Rising from a chair is not just exercise. It is the very pattern of life you are trying to protect. Getting off the couch, getting out of bed, getting up from the toilet in the dark. The day you cannot do those things unaided is the day a great deal of your independence quietly leaves the house. So the first movement rehearses the one thing you most need to keep. The second movement is the heel raise. You stand behind the chair or beside a counter, resting your fingertips there lightly, just for balance, not to haul yourself up. And you rise onto the balls of your feet, lifting your heels off the floor, and then you lower them, slow, 15 to 20 times. This one is aimed lower down, at the calf muscles, at the ankles, at all those small stabilizing muscles that live around the ankle joint and that you never think about until they fail you. And here is why they matter more than they seem to. When you walk, and even more when you catch yourself after a stumble, the ankle is the first joint that has to answer. It is the fine tuner, the little steering muscle that keeps your weight stacked over your feet. A strong pair of calves and stiff, reliable ankles are a quiet insurance policy against the sideways tip that ends in a broken hip. The third movement steps away from the legs for a moment, and it is the wall push-up. You stand on arm's length from a wall, place your palms flat against it, and you bend your elbows to bring your chest toward the wall, then press yourself back. 8 to 10 times. Now you might ask, and it would be a fair question, why on earth are we doing something for the arms in a routine that is supposed to save the legs? And the answer is honest and a little humbling. When a person begins to fall, the arms are the second line of defense. You reach out. You brace against the counter, against the wall, against the floor, rushing up. An older person with soft, unused arms has thrown away that second chance. The wall push-up keeps a little strength in the chest and the shoulders and the arms, so that when the legs are overwhelmed, the hands still have something to say. The fourth movement is the standing march. You stand tall, holding the chair if you need to, and you lift one knee up, then set it down, then lift the other, marching in place, 30 to 45 seconds of it. And this one is sly, because it looks like nothing. It looks like you are pretending to walk while going nowhere. But watch what actually happens. Every time you lift one knee, for a moment, you are balanced entirely on the opposite leg. One foot, all your weight. And your body has to solve in real time the problem of not tipping over. That is not a strength exercise so much as a balance exercise. A rehearsal for the single leg instant that happens in every real step you take. The instant walking demands but never trains you to survive when it goes wrong. And the fifth movement is the step back toe tap. You stand and you reach one foot backward, tapping the toe to the floor behind you, then bring it home, then the other foot 30 to 45 seconds. This one trains you to move your weight backward and to the side under control, which is precisely the direction people are worst at catching themselves. It teaches the hips and the legs to handle a shifting base, to stay organized when the ground underneath you is not where you expected it to be. 5 movements. Dr. Trackman says to begin with just one round of them, one time through, and only when that feels easy do you build up to 2 rounds. That is the whole prescription. 1 round, then someday 2. 5 to 7 minutes beside a kitchen chair. And I want you to sit with how strange and wonderful that is. Because everything we have uncovered tonight, the 2 armies in the leg, the fast fibers withering while the slow ones stay employed, the neuromuscular wire that only answers a loud call, The Copenhagen retirees who held their strength for 4 years, all of it, the entire mountain of it, comes to rest on a routine so small that a tired, frightened, ordinary person might actually do it, and you should not mistake small for weak. Remember what the evidence says about brief work. There was a study, mean age around 55, so a little younger than our 70, of people doing only about 12 minutes of resistance training twice a week on 5 machines. After 12 to 19 weeks, their leg press strength had climbed by 38.4% in the men and by 59% in the women, nearly doubling in the women from a few short sessions. That is not a rounding error. That is the fast army, roused at last, reporting for duty and rebuilding itself. Muscle does not check the clock. It checks the load and the intention. 12 honest minutes shouted louder than hours of gentle strolling ever could, because the strolling was speaking a language the fast fibers simply do not hear. So why does the short routine work when the long walk, for all its virtue, leaves this cap unfilled? Part of the answer is pure physics, the physics of the stimulus, which we have been building all along. But part of the answer, and it may be the more important part, is a fact about human beings, about tiredness and willingness and the honest limits of what a person will actually do day after day. Because the best exercise in the world, the one perfectly designed to wake the fast fibers and strengthen the wire and hold off the sideways fall, is worth exactly nothing if the person will not do it. And it turns out that when you ask older people what they are willing to do, their answer is not what the guidelines assume. Their answer is quiet, and it is reasonable, and once you hear it, the entire case for 5 minutes stops being about muscle fibers at all and starts being about something much more human. Let me tell you what happened when someone finally thought to ask them. Someone did ask them at last, and the asking was itself a kind of experiment. They went out across the country and found 611 people, all of them past the age of 65, and they put a simple choice in front of each one. Here is the standard prescription, they said. 45 minutes of resistance training, 3 days every week. You will lift, you will rest, you will lift again, and you will do this on a schedule for the rest of your life. And here, next to it, is a different offer. 5 minutes. Every day. That is the whole of it. Which one would you actually do? And the numbers came back, and they were not close. Roughly 68 of every 100 people chose the 5 minutes. Only about 32 of every 100 wanted the longer, more formal program. More than 2 to 1 in favor of the small thing. And when you cut that number and looked only at the people who already had trouble walking, the very people who need the muscle most, the people for whom a fall is not an inconvenience but a catastrophe, the preference did not shrink. It grew. Among them, nearly 9 in every 10 chose the short routine. The ones with the most to lose wanted the least ceremony. The preference ratio there was better than 5 to 1. Now sit with that for a moment, because there is something almost tender in it, and something a physicist ought to respect. We tend to think that the right answer is the one written in the journals. The optimal dose, the perfectly progressed load. And in a sense it is. But there is another quantity, one that never appears in the exercise physiology paper, and it is the probability that the human being will comply. Call it willingness, if you like. And the total benefit a person receives is not the benefit of the ideal program. It is the benefit of the program multiplied by the chance they actually carry it out. A magnificent routine done 0 times a week delivers 0. A humble routine done 7 times a week delivers something real, day after day after day. When you multiply the two, the small honest thing very often wins. We already saw the shadow of this problem before we understood it. Fewer than 1 in 5 older adults in the country manages to meet the guideline of resistance training twice a week. That is not because those people are lazy, and it is not because they do not care about their own bodies. It is because the guideline, as written, asks for a size of effort that most people, in the real texture of their lives, will not sustain. So the walk survives, not because it is the best stimulus, but because it is the stimulus a person will still be doing next March. The walk wins on willingness even as it loses on physics. And the whole trick, the thing that makes 5 minutes such a quietly clever idea, is that it tries to win on both at once. Enough load to speak to the fast fibers. Little enough time that a tired person on a gray morning will still say, "All right, fine, 5 minutes, I can give it that." There is a piece of arithmetic hiding in here that I find delightful. The fast twitch fibers, the ones we have been worried about this whole long evening, do not need to be argued with for an hour. They are not fatigue machines. They are the opposite. They fire hard and they fire briefly and then they are spent. A slow fiber will keep a gentle tension going for a very long time, which is exactly why it runs the walking and the standing and the long patient work of staying upright all day. But the fast fiber is built for the short violent contract. To recruit it, you do not need duration. You need intensity. You need to ask the muscle for enough force that the nervous system, having exhausted the polite slow fibers, is forced to call up the reserves. And once you have called them up a few times, you have done the thing. 15 more minutes of walking will not call them any louder. So the fast fibers and the 5-minute routine are, in a way, made for each other. The fiber that ages worst is precisely the fiber that responds to brief, hard, honest effort. Duration is wasted on it. Duration is for the slow army, and the slow army, remember, is doing fine. So now let me actually take you through the small routine movement by movement, the way I would take apart any machine to see what each part is for. Because it is one thing to say 5 minutes works, and another thing entirely to feel why each of the 5 pieces was chosen and to see that not one of them is arbitrary. This particular routine comes from a physical therapist, a doctor named Devin Trackman, who works with older adults, and every one of her 5 exercises is aimed at a specific deficit we have already diagnosed tonight. She is not guessing. She is patching the exact holes we found. The first movement is the one she puts first for a reason, and it is the plainest thing in the world. You sit in a chair, and then you stand up, and then you sit down again, and you do this 8 or 10 times. That is all. Sit to stand. Now I want you to notice something. This is not exercise in any dramatic sense. Nobody sweats. Nobody grunts under a barbell. But look at what the movement demands. To rise from a chair, you must generate, in a fraction of a second, enough force through the big muscles on the front of the thigh and the big muscles of the seat, the quadriceps and the glutes, to lift your entire body weight against gravity from a dead stop. From nothing to moving, all at once. That is the very definition of power. Force times speed. And it targets, on purpose, the 2 largest muscles in the lower body, the ones that carry the most fast-twitch tissue, the ones aging strips fastest. Every time you rise from that chair, you are asking the fast fibers to do the one thing walking never asks. You are rehearsing, over and over, the exact pattern that lets you get off the couch at 80 without a struggle, off the bed, off the low seat, up from the floor. It looks like nothing. It is quietly the most important exercise in the set. The second movement moves the attention down to the ankle. You stand, resting your hands lightly on a wall or a countertop for balance, and you rise up onto the balls of your feet, lifting your heels, and then you lower them, 15 or 20 times. Heel raises. This one wakes the calf, and the ankle, and all the small stabilizing muscles that live down there and do their work without ever being noticed. Think about what the ankle actually does when you walk. It is the last joint between you and the ground, the final translator of every intention into contact with the earth. And it is the ankle that must fire fast when the ground is not where you expected it. A strong calf and a strong ankle are a great deal of what stands between a wobble and a fall. 15 quiet lifts against your own body weight, and you have spoken to muscles the flat rhythm of a walk barely troubles. The third movement leaves the legs for a moment and turns to the upper body, and I think it is easy to underrate. You stand facing a wall, place your hands on it, and lower your chest toward the wall and push yourself back 8 or 10 times. A wall push-up. Now why put an arm exercise in a leg and balance routine? Because catching yourself is not only a leg event. When you begin to go down, the arms come out. They brace against the counter, the door frame, the falling body's own weight. An upper body that has kept some strength is an upper body that can arrest a fall, or soften one, or push a body back to standing before the fall completes. The wall push-up is a gentle way to keep that reserve alive, scaled so that a person of any strength can find a version that challenges them, simply by how far they stand from the wall. The fourth movement is where balance itself becomes the target. You stand and you march in place, lifting one knee and then the other for 30 to 45 seconds. A standing march, and here is the beautiful part. Every time you lift one knee, you are, for that instant, standing on a single leg. You have cut your base of support in half. The body must find its balance again and again. Left, right, and each lift is a tiny controlled crisis that the stabilizing system must solve in real time. This is not strength in the raw sense. This is the training of the loop between sensing where you are and correcting where you are. The very loop that a fall exploits when it moves faster than the loop can respond. You are speeding up the loop. You are teaching the nervous system to keep you over your own feet when one of those feet is briefly in the air, which, if you think about it, is the entire secret of walking in the first place. And the fifth movement finishes the set by rehearsing the moment of the misstep directly. You stand and you tap one foot back behind you and bring it home, then the other, for 30 to 45 seconds. A step back toe tap. This trains you to shift your weight and reach into space and recover, to move your base of support backward and still stay upright, which is close cousin to what your body must do when it is nudged off center. She advises starting with a single round of these 5, and then, as they grow easy, building to 2 rounds. 1 round is your 5 minutes, 2 rounds is still under 10. That is the whole prescription. 5 small movements, each one a deliberate patch over a specific hole we spent the evening finding. Now let me ask you something that has been sitting quietly at the back of this whole conversation. If short and sharp is enough, if a handful of minutes aimed at the fast fibers can do what an hour of strolling cannot, then why on earth do we keep prescribing the hour? And the honest answer has almost nothing to do with muscle and almost everything to do with the stubborn, ordinary fact of what a person will actually do. Here is a thing I find quietly funny. Somebody went out and asked older people, straight out, which they would rather do. They gathered 611 adults over the age of 65 all across the country, and they laid 2 choices on the table. On one side, the respectable, doctor-approved program. 45 minutes at a stretch, 3 days every week. On the other side, a small thing. 5 minutes, done every day. And you might think, well, the serious people will pick the serious program, because they know it is good for them the way we all know spinach is good for us. But that is not what happened. More than 2 out of every 3 of them, roughly 68 of every 100, picked the little 5-minute version. Only about 32 in 100 wanted the long formal one, and that gap did not appear by luck. When you run the numbers, the odds that a preference that lopsided is just noise are vanishingly small. Sit with that for a moment, because it is more interesting than it first looks. These are not lazy people. They are people telling you the truth about their own lives. And then the study did something sharper still. It looked at the subgroup you would worry about most, the people who already have trouble walking, the very ones for whom a fall is not an inconvenience but a catastrophe. And in that group, the preference did not shrink, it grew. Among those with real difficulty walking, the pull toward the short program rose to more than 5 to 1. Almost 7 in every 8 of them chose the 5 minutes. The people with the most to lose wanted the smallest, gentlest door into the room. Why does that matter so much? Because an exercise that does not get done has an effect size of exactly 0. You can have the most elegant physiology in the world, the perfect stimulus tuned to the perfect fiber, and if the person looks at it and quietly decides it is too much and never begins, then all your beautiful biology is worth nothing at all. The best routine is not the one that works best on paper. It is the one that a real human being, on a gray Tuesday morning with aching knees and a long list of other worries, will actually stand up and do again the next day, and the day after that. And this is where the guidelines have been quietly failing. Remember the number I set down near the beginning of all this, the one I told you to leave alone for a while. Fewer than 1 in 5 older adults in this country meets the recommendation to do resistance work twice a week. Fewer than 20 in 100. Now that is not because 80 and 100 are foolish or weak-willed. It is because the recommendation, as usually delivered, asks for a trip to a gym or a set of unfamiliar machines or 45 minutes carved out of a day that already feels too small. We designed a prescription that is physiologically sound and behaviorally impossible, and then we blame the patient for not swallowing it. That is not good science. That is not even good sense. The 5-minute routine is an answer to that failure, and it is a clever one, because it attacks the problem from the side nobody was guarding. It does not try to make people more disciplined. It makes the task smaller than the resistance to it. Nobody negotiates with themselves over 5 minutes. You do not need a gym. You do not need to change your clothes. You do not need to drive anywhere. You need a wall, a chair, and the willingness to stand up out of that chair 8 or 10 times. The threshold to begin is set so low that the excuse machinery in your head never quite gets started. And a thing you do every single day, even badly, even briefly, beats a magnificent thing you do twice and then abandon by the end of the month. Now I want to be careful here, because I promised you at the outset that I would not cheat, and there is a real scientific question hiding under all this cheerfulness. Can something this brief actually move the needle? Is 5 minutes a genuine dose? Or is it a comforting placebo we tell ourselves so we feel virtuous? And the answer, as best we can tell, is that brief really can be real, provided the brief thing is aimed correctly. There is work in which people did resistance training that came to only about 12 minutes of actual effort per session twice a week on a small handful of machines. Not marathon sessions. Not heroics. And after somewhere between 12 and 19 weeks, their leg press strength had climbed enormously. In the men by something like 38%, in the women by 59%. More than half again as strong as when they started, from a dozen minutes twice a week. I have to lay one caveat on the table honestly, because it belongs there. The people in that particular study were younger than the ones we have been talking about all night. Their average age was around 55, not 70 or beyond. So I cannot simply lift that exact number and stamp it onto an 80-year-old, and I will not pretend otherwise. But the principle underneath it does not evaporate with age. If anything, the older muscle is hungrier for the signal, not deafer to it. And we have separate evidence for that too. There is work showing that even low-intensity resistance training, gentle loads, nothing brutal, can produce substantial increases in muscle size in older individuals. One trial saw something like a 29 to 32% gain in muscle strength after just 8 weeks. 8 weeks. Not a lifetime of dedication. 2 months of small, consistent, correctly aimed effort. So the picture that emerges is not the one we usually paint. We usually imagine that strength is bought only with suffering, with heavy iron and gritted teeth and a great deal of time. But the muscle does not know how long you were in the room. The muscle knows one thing. It knows whether it was asked clearly and firmly to produce a force close to the top of what it can manage. That is the message. That is the whole message. If the signal is loud enough, the fiber responds, and it does not much care whether the loud signal lasted an hour or lasted 90 seconds. What it will not respond to is a whisper repeated 10,000 times. And a gentle walk, for those fast fibers, is a whisper repeated 10,000 times. This is the thing that took me a while to properly feel, so let me say it slowly. There are 2 completely different currencies here, and we have been paying in the wrong one. Walking spends time. You give it minutes and miles, and it gives you back endurance, a healthier heart, a clearer head, all genuinely precious things I will defend to the end. But the fast fibers are not for sale in the currency of time. They are for sale only in the currency of intensity. And no amount of the first currency, however much you pile it up, however many mornings you lace up those sneakers, will ever add up to a single coin of the second. You can walk 10,000 steps a day for 20 years and never once ask a type 2 fiber to do the one thing it exists to do, which is to fire hard and fast, right now, at once. That is not a knock against the walker. The walker is doing something wonderful. It is a knock against the belief that the walk is complete, that it is the whole of what an aging body needs, that having done it, we may consider the account settled. The account is not settled. There is a second bill written in a different currency, and for most of a lifetime it goes quietly unpaid, because nothing in ordinary, gentle daily life ever presents it to us. Youth pays that bill automatically, without thinking, every time a young person sprints for a bus or jumps a puddle or carries something heavy up the stairs two at a time. We stop doing those things so gradually that we never notice the day we stopped, and the fibers, unpaid, unasked, quietly shrink. The 5-minute routine is, in the plainest terms, a way of paying that second bill on purpose, in small, honest installments, because life no longer collects it from us for free. The sit-to-stand collects a little. The heel raise collects a little. The wall push-up, the march, the toe tap, each one hands over a small payment in the currency of intensity that no walk could ever provide. And done daily, those small payments keep the account from falling into the arrears we call frailty. That word, frailty, is not a mystery. It is not fate. A great deal of it is simply the sum of a bill left unpaid for 30 years. But I have been telling you a very tidy story tonight, and I have a rule about tidy stories, which is that I do not fully trust them. When a thing lines up this neatly, when every fact seems to salute the same conclusion, that is exactly the moment a careful person should get suspicious and go looking for the fact that does not salute. And there is one. There is a large and serious body of data that walked straight up to my beautiful argument and slapped it across the face. So before I let you rest tonight, believing you have the whole answer, I owe it to you to turn and face the strongest evidence on the other side. The evidence that seems, at first reading, to say I have had it backward all along. So let me set that evidence in front of you honestly, the way you would want a friend to do it, without softening a single edge. There is a large study of women, thousands of them, ranging in age from the middle of their 70s all the way up past 100. And the people running it did something simple and clever. They asked over a long stretch of time how much these women walked and how much these women did any kind of strengthening work, and then they watched to see who fell and who did not. Now, if my tidy story were the whole truth, you would expect the strengthening to be the hero. You would expect the women who lifted and pushed and squatted to be the ones who stayed on their feet, and the women who only strolled to be tumbling over left and right. That is what I would have bet on an hour ago. That is what my beautiful fiber arguments seem to promise. But that is not what the numbers said. The women who did at least a couple of hours of strength work each week did indeed fall less. Their risk came down by roughly 30% compared with the women who did none. That is a real and lovely thing, and I do not want you to lose it. But the women who walked a great deal, more than 4 hours a week, well over half an hour a day, those women fell far less still. Their risk dropped by something closer to 64%. Read that plainly, and it looks like a defeat for everything I have said tonight. It looks like walking, the very thing I have spent this whole talk gently poking at, came out ahead. And I could feel the temptation right there to hurry past it, to mumble something and change the subject. But you do not learn anything by running from the fact that argues with you. You learn by walking straight up to it and turning its pockets inside out. So let us turn its pockets inside out. The first thing to notice, and it is the thing almost everyone misses, is what kind of study this was. Nobody assigned these women to walk or not to walk. Nobody flipped a coin. The researchers simply found people already living their lives and asked what those lives looked like. And when you do that, you cannot cleanly tell which way the arrow of cause is pointing. Think about it gently for a moment. Who is the woman at 85 who happens to already be walking 4.5 hours every week? Is she a frail, unsteady person clutching the furniture? Of course not. She is, almost by definition, a woman whose legs already work, whose balance is already sound, whose hips do not ache too much to carry her out the door. The walking did not only make her steady. Her steadiness is part of what let her walk that much in the first place. The strong, well-knit, lucky legs go for the long walks, and the long walks also help the legs, and the two things braid together so tightly that no survey on earth can pull them apart. So when we see that heavy walkers fall less, we are seeing, in part, that people who can walk a lot are people whose bodies were already in good order. The walking is partly a cause, yes, but it is also a symptom of health, a flag flying over a house that was already sound. Now compare that to the study I told you about earlier out of Copenhagen, where they did flip the coin. There they took people who did not choose their own fate and they assigned it. And when the choice is taken out of the person's hands, when chance alone decides who lifts and who does not, the strengthening is the thing that holds the line over the years. That is the difference between watching the world and questioning it. Watching the world, walking looks like the champion. Questioning the world, forcing the comparison, resistance keeps its footing. Both kinds of study are telling the truth. They are just answering slightly different questions, and you have to be very careful which question you think you are asking. But here is the second thing hiding in those pockets, and to me it is the more honest one, so I will not dress it up. Set aside the tangle of cause and effect for a moment. Suppose the walking really is doing all of that work, really is cutting the falls by that great fraction. Look again at the dose. 4¼ hours a week. That is not the gentle amble I have been quietly teasing. That is not the retired school teacher taking her 20 easy minutes around the block and coming home. That is a serious, sustained daily commitment. A person who has folded a good long walk into the middle of every single day. And I would never, not for 1 second, tell such a person to stop. If you can walk that much and you love it, then walk, and walk, and walk again. It is a marvelous thing for the heart, for the lungs, for the mood, for the slow-burning aerobic engine we spent an earlier part of this evening admiring. So you see, this fact that seemed to slap my argument across the face does no such thing once you look at it kindly and closely. It does not say walking is enough and strength is a waste. It says something far more sensible, something I think you already half suspected. It says the person who does best of all is not the one who chose a side. It is the one who refused to choose. Walk for the engine. Strengthen for the fast fibers and the wiring. The walking keeps the fuel line open and the mood bright and the aerobic fire lit. The strengthening keeps the emergency brakes installed, the sudden high-force catch you need in the quarter of a second after your toe finds a rug. These are not rivals. They were never rivals. I set them up as boxes earlier because that is how the question is usually shouted at you, one against the other, and I wanted you to feel the shape of the fight. But the resolution of this fight is the one I like best. The one that keeps turning up in physics too. You go looking for which of two things is true, and nature leans over and tells you very quietly that you asked a foolish question, because both are true and they are doing different jobs. And notice, please, what this does to the title I hung over this whole talk. I told you to stop doing long walks. That was, I will confess it now, a little bit of a fib, a firecracker tossed on the stage to make you sit up. The honest version is quieter and better. It is not that walking is wrong, it is that walking all by itself leaves a specific door unlocked, and something can come through that door in the night. For 30 years the fast fibers wither, the wiring goes slack, the power drains away twice as fast as the plane's strength, and no amount of gentle strolling reaches into that room to hold it up. The 5 minutes we have been circling all evening is not a replacement for the walk. It is the lock on the one door the walk never touches. And that is a very different sentence from the one I opened with. It is less exciting and far more true, and at your age and mine we should prefer the true one. So where does that leave us? Standing here in the middle of the night, with the tidy story bruised but still breathing, and the objection turned inside out and handed back with thanks. It leaves us needing to look, at last, at the 5 minutes themselves. Because up to now I have been waving at them, treating them almost like a magic phrase. 5 minutes. 5 minutes, as if the number itself carried the medicine. It does not. The number is nothing. What matters is what you actually do inside those 5 minutes, and whether each thing you do reaches into that unlocked room and touches the fibers in the wire that the walking cannot. A poorly chosen 5 minutes is worth nothing at all. You could spend it swinging your arms in circles and feel very virtuous and change not one cell in your legs. So the real work, the thing we have been building toward this whole long evening, is to take a routine that a careful physical therapist actually hands to older people. 5 simple movements, nothing exotic, nothing that needs a machine or a gymnasium, and to open each one up like the back of a watch and ask, what is this particular motion for? What deficit? In what fiber? Along what wire is it quietly repairing? Because when you understand why a thing works, you do it. And when you only obey it, you quit by Thursday. So let me pick up the first of those 5 movements and turn it over in the light. It is the humblest thing imaginable. You sit in a chair and you stand up and you sit back down and you do that 8 or 10 times. That is all. A child does it 100 times a day without a thought. And yet inside that plain little rise from the chair is very nearly the whole physics of everything I have told you tonight, folded up small. Watch what actually happens when you go from sitting to standing. You are folded at the hip, folded at the knee, and your center of weight is hovering back over the seat, behind your feet, in a place from which, if you did nothing, you would simply stay put or topple backward. To rise, you must first tip your trunk forward, throwing that center of weight out over your toes, and then, in one coordinated surge, your quadriceps on the front of the thigh and your gluteal muscles across the seat of the hips must pull you up against the full pull of the earth. There is no cheating it. There is no coasting phase, no downhill, no momentum you built up earlier that you can borrow. Every single repetition starts from a dead stop, from stillness, and stillness is the hardest place to move from. A car pushed from a standstill takes far more effort in that first foot than it does once it is rolling. Your legs are the same. The rise from the chair is all first foot over and over, and here is the quiet marvel of it. The quadriceps and the gluteal muscles are the 2 largest muscle groups in the whole lower half of you. They are precisely the muscles most loaded with fast twitch fiber, and precisely the muscles that aging strips first and strips hardest. So when a therapist asks a person of 70 to stand up from a chair 8 or 10 times in slow, deliberate succession, she is not giving them busy work. She is aiming a demand directly at the tissue that is disappearing. She is saying to those big fast fibers, you are still needed, do not leave. And the beauty is that the movement is one the body already knows. Nobody has to be taught to stand up. You have done it perhaps 250,000 times. So there is no awkward learning, no strange posture to master. You simply take the most ordinary act of daily life and you do it on purpose, with attention, as exercise. The same motion that walking never asks of you in any concentrated way, because on a walk you rise from a chair once at the start and sit once at the end, and in between you never challenge those big extensors at all. Think about what that means for the person who walks faithfully every morning and does nothing else. Their calves and their heart and their slow endurance fibers are getting a steady, gentle conversation, day after day. But the great quadriceps, the muscles that lift the whole body against gravity from a low position, those muscles go for months, for years, hearing almost nothing loud enough to matter. And a muscle that is never asked to produce a large force quietly concludes that it does not need to be able to. It lets its fast fibers wither, because upkeep is expensive and the body is thrifty. The sit to stand is a way of sending that muscle a letter it cannot ignore. Rise against gravity, from a stop, 10 times, and there is no interpretation of that signal except we still require strength here. Now let me turn the second movement over in the light, because it guards a different door. You stand near a wall or a countertop, resting your fingertips there just lightly, only for balance, not for lifting, and you rise up onto the balls of your feet, lifting your heels off the floor 15 or 20 times. The heel raise, it looks like almost nothing. But consider what it trains. The calf muscles, the pair of them running down the back of the lower leg into the great tendon at the heel, are the muscles that push you off the ground with every step, and, just as importantly, they are the muscles that stabilize the ankle. And the ankle, that small hinge where the leg meets the foot, is the first joint in the whole tower of you that has to respond when the ground does something unexpected. When you step on a stone, when the sidewalk tilts, when a rug slides, it is the ankle that must react first in a fraction of a second before the knee or the hip even know there is trouble. A strong, quick calf and a stable ankle are the body's front line, the sentries posted closest to the ground. And notice the pattern hidden inside the heel raise. You go up, which is the calf contracting and shortening, producing force. But then you must come down slowly, with control, lowering the heel back to the floor without simply dropping. That slow lowering where the muscle is producing force while it is lengthening, holding back against gravity like a rope paying out a heavy bucket hand over hand, that is a particularly rich kind of work. Muscles that are made to resist while they stretch are doing some of the most protective labor there is, because that lengthening under load is exactly what your leg does in the instant you begin to fall. When your weight drops onto a leg that was not quite ready, the muscle must catch that weight while lengthening, must break it, must not let the joint collapse. The heel raise rehearses that breaking over and over in miniature in perfect safety with your fingers resting on a wall. The third movement lifts our attention off the legs entirely, up to the wall in front of you, and at first it seems out of place in a routine about legs and falling. It is the wall push-up. You stand an arm's length from a wall, place your palms flat against it at about the height of your shoulders, and you bend your elbows and let your body lean in toward the wall, then push yourself back out 8 or 10 times. Why on earth, you might ask, are we training the arms and the chest in a program meant to keep an old body upright? And the answer is one of the loveliest pieces of practical physics in the whole scheme. When a person begins to fall, the arms are the last defense, the crumple zone, the thing you throw out to break your impact against the floor, or to catch the edge of a table, or to shove yourself off a wall you have blundered into. A person with weak arms who falls has nothing to slow the meeting of their body and the ground. A person with even modestly strong arms can turn a catastrophe into a bruise. And more than that, more than 95 out of every 100 hip fractures in older people come from falling sideways, and the sideways fall is often intercepted or softened or redirected by an arm that shoots out and finds a surface. The wall push-up is not really about the chest at all. It is about installing a working set of brakes on the upper body, so that on the day the legs fail, the arms are ready to argue with the floor. The fourth movement returns us to the ground and adds a new ingredient, one we have circled all evening but not yet trained directly. It is the standing march. You stand tall, again with a light touch on a support if you need it, and you lift one knee up, then set it down, then lift the other, marching in place for 30 to 45 seconds. And what this does that the others do not is that it puts you, on purpose, into the most precarious posture a human ever holds, which is standing on one leg. For a moment, every time a knee comes up, your entire weight is balanced on a single foot, on a base no bigger than a shoe, with a whole swaying tower of body stacked above it. Balance is not a thing you have. It is a thing you are doing continuously, 1,000 tiny corrections a second. The ankle twitching, the hip firing, the little muscles along the foot gripping, all of it managed below the level of your awareness by that same nervous system, those same motor neurons we have been talking about. And single leg standing is the purest possible demand on that whole control system. The march trains not just muscle but the wiring, the reflexes, the split-second corrections that keep a stumble from becoming a fall. It is balance practice disguised as an old-fashioned exercise you might have done as a child in a schoolyard. And the fifth movement is the subtlest, and in some ways the cleverest, because it trains the body to move backward and to the side, directions that walking almost never explores. It is the step-back toe tap. You stand, and you reach one foot back behind you and tap the toe lightly to the floor, then bring it home, then the other for 30 to 45 seconds. Now consider your ordinary life. You spend nearly all of your moving hours going forward. Forward down the hall, forward to the kitchen, forward along the street. You almost never step backward, and when you do in the real world, it is usually because something startled you, because you flinched away from a door swinging open or a person you did not hear approach. And stepping backward, or catching yourself as you drift backward, is one of the most common ways older people lose their balance and go down, precisely because it is a direction they have not practiced in decades. The toe tap deliberately rehearses that neglected direction. It teaches the hip and the trunk to organize a controlled backward reach, so that when life demands one without warning, the pattern is not brand new and terrifying, but familiar and owned. So look at what this therapist has assembled, in 5 movements that take, all told, between 5 and 7 minutes. She has aimed the first at the great gravity-fighting muscles that vanish first. She has aimed the second at the ankle sentries and the art of breaking a lengthening muscle. She has aimed the third at installing brakes on the arms for the last instant of a fall. She has aimed the fourth at the single leg wire, the balance you are always doing and never notice. And she has aimed the fifth at the forgotten directions, backward and sideways, where the falls actually happen. It is not a random little set of calisthenics. It is a small, elegant machine, each part chosen to repair one specific deficit in one specific tissue along one specific wire. And she says, begin with a single round. And when that grows easy, do it twice. That is the whole prescription. That is the thing we spent all this time earning the right to understand. Now I want to tell you something that surprised me, because it runs against the grain of everything we like to believe about virtue and effort. We have this idea, deep in our bones, that the medicine that helps must be the medicine that hurts, that if a little is good, then a lot must be better, and that the person who exercises for an hour is twice as righteous as the person who exercises for 30 minutes. It is a lovely moral story. It is also, for this particular problem, mostly wrong. And here is the piece of evidence that made me sit up. Somebody went and asked. That is such a simple, honest thing to do in science, and people forget to do it. They took 611 adults, all of them 65 years or older, spread across the whole country, and they laid out two choices. Behind the first door was the respectable, doctor-approved program, 45 minutes of resistance training 3 days a week. The kind of thing you would write on a prescription pad and feel proud of. Behind the second door was something almost embarrassingly small. 5 minutes. Every day. That was it. And then they asked these older people a plain question. Which one would you actually do? Now, if you believe the moral story, you would expect them to reach for the serious program, the one that sounds like it means business. That is not what happened. More than 68 of every 100 of them, 68.4% to be exact, chose the 5-minute door. Only about 31 in 100 chose the long program. That is better than 2 to 1 in favor of the small thing. And the researchers looked at that gap, and it was not some fuzzy coincidence. The odds of it happening by chance were less than 1 in 1,000. But that is not the part that stopped me. Here is the part that stopped me. They pulled out the people in that group who already had trouble walking. The very people, mind you, who need this most. The ones closest to the edge, the ones for whom a fall is not a scare but a catastrophe. And among those people, the preference did not shrink. It grew. It swung to more than 5 to 1. 87 of every 100 of them chose the 5-minute program. Think about what that is telling you. The frailer a person is, the less they want the grand hour of effort, and the more they want the small daily thing they can actually finish. The need and the willingness are pulling in opposite directions, and the long program sits on the wrong side of that split. Why should we care what people prefer? Isn't that just laziness, and shouldn't a good doctor override it? No, and this is the whole quiet secret of the thing. An exercise you will not do has an effectiveness of exactly 0. It does not matter how magnificent the program looks on paper. It does not matter that the laboratory measured beautiful gains from it. If the human being does not lace up and do it, the muscle never gets the message, the wire never lights up, the fast fibers go on quietly shrinking in the dark. A treatment only works when it is taken. And we have the numbers on what actually gets taken. Fewer than 1 in 5 older adults in this country meets the guideline of resistance training even twice a week. Fewer than 20 in 100, which means the grand program, the 45-minute 3-day prescription we all nod at, is being ignored by more than 80% of the very people it was written for. It is a magnificent bridge that nobody crosses. So now you can see the 5-minute routine in a different light. It is not a watered-down compromise, a little something for people who cannot handle the real thing. It is engineered around the one variable that decides everything, which is whether the person keeps doing it. 5 minutes is short enough to survive a bad morning. It is short enough to survive stiff joints and low spirits and a gray day when nothing feels good. It fits into the small, unclaimed corner of a life, next to the kettle warming, next to the morning window. And because it is done daily, the nervous system gets a small, frequent, reliable knock on the door again and again, rather than one heroic pounding followed by 6 days of silence. I want to be careful and fair here, because I promised you I would not cheat. Does 5 minutes of gentle work actually build real strength, Or is it just a pleasant ritual that makes people feel busy? This is exactly the kind of question where you must go and look, not guess. So let us look. There is a study that took a group of ordinary people and gave them brief sessions, about 12 minutes each, only twice a week, on 5 simple machines. Not marathons. Short, sane sessions. And after somewhere between 12 and 19 weeks, they measured the leg press, which is really just a machine version of standing up out of a chair. The men had gotten stronger by more than 38%. The women by 59%. 59% stronger from brief work twice a week. And the gains were not just in that one movement. They showed up across all 5 exercises fairly evenly, as if the whole lower body had woken from a long doze. Now I owe you a piece of honesty about that study, because a good detective does not hide the inconvenient fact. The people in it were not, on average, 70 years old. Their average age was closer to 55, so I cannot simply hand you those exact percentages and say, this is what will happen to your grandmother. That would be dishonest, and it would be bad science. But the study still tells us something we needed to know, and it is this. Brief resistance work, done consistently, produces large and real changes in strength. The small dose is not a placebo. The muscle genuinely responds to it. And when we set that beside the older adult evidence we already walked through together, the meta-analysis of thousands of people in their 60s and 70s and 80s, the picture holds together. Even lower intensity resistance work, the gentle kind, has been shown to produce substantial increases in muscle size in older individuals. One trial found strength climbing by roughly 30% after only 8 weeks. 8 weeks! That is the length of a summer. So the muscle, it turns out, is not nearly as stubborn as its owner fears. It is listening the whole time. It is waiting for a signal it stopped receiving somewhere back in the walking years, the signal that says, we still need the strong ones, wake them up, keep them. And the astonishing thing, the thing that should give an older person real hope rather than the vague guilt we usually hand them, is how little signal it takes to change the answer. Not an hour, not a gym membership, not a young body, a chair, a wall, and 5 honest minutes. Let me put the 2 facts side by side, because together they make a claim that neither makes alone. The first fact is that the short routine works, that brief resistance loading really does build strength in aging legs. The second fact is that the short routine gets done, that older people, and especially the frailest older people, will actually keep at it when the long program sits untouched on the shelf. Multiply those 2 together, an effective treatment times a treatment people will actually take. That product, the real-world benefit, the strength that actually shows up in actual living rooms across actual years, may well be larger for the small daily thing than for the grand program that looks so much more impressive on the prescription pad. Effectiveness on paper is one number. Effectiveness in a life is that number multiplied by whether it ever gets used. And we have spent 100 years admiring the first number and forgetting to multiply. I keep coming back in my mind to those 87 out of 100 struggling walkers who chose the 5 minutes, because there is a kind of wisdom in that choice that the experts nearly missed. Those people were not being lazy. They were being accurate. They knew, in the honest private way a person knows their own limits, exactly how much they could sustain, day after day, through the ordinary weather of an aging life. And they picked a dose they could actually keep. That is not a failure of willpower. That is a correct reading of reality. The mistake was never theirs. The mistake was ours, for handing them a program built for a body they no longer had, and then quietly blaming them when they could not follow it. And so the shape of the answer is finally coming clear, though we are not quite done with it yet. We started with a beautiful gospel, the daily walk, and we found it was true but incomplete. A tonic for the slow army that leaves the fast army sleeping. We found the specific tissue that fails, and the specific wire that goes quiet, and the specific milliseconds in which a stumble decides whether it will become a fall. We watched a Copenhagen laboratory prove that only the heavy signal held the line across 4 long years. And now we have found the last missing piece, which is not about physiology at all, but about human beings, and what they will and will not do when left alone with their good intentions on a cold morning. The routine that heals is the routine that repeats. And the routine that repeats is the small one. So let me sit with that survey a little longer, because it is telling us something about human nature that the physiology alone could never tell us. 611 older adults asked to choose. On one hand, the respectable program, 45 minutes, 3 days a week, the kind of thing a serious clinic prescribes. On the other, a small daily thing, 5 minutes, done in the kitchen before the kettle sings. And 68.4% of them chose the small one. That is a little more than 2 to 1. And when you narrowed the question to the people who already had trouble walking, the very people who need the muscle most, the preference did not weaken. It grew. It became 5.3 to 1. 87 of every 100 of them reached for the short program. Now think about what that means. The people in the most danger were the ones most repelled by the long prescription and most drawn to the short one. We had been aiming our best medicine at exactly the people least able to swallow it. There is a temptation, when you see a number like 68%, to sniff at it. To say, well, of course people prefer to do less, people are lazy, people want the easy road. But I do not think that is the right reading, and I want to be careful here, because it is easy to be unkind when you are healthy and your knees do not ache. The person choosing 5 minutes is not choosing to do nothing. They are choosing the thing they can actually keep doing. And in a body that loses muscle whether you tend it or not, the thing you can keep doing is worth more than the perfect thing you will quit in 3 weeks. A treatment nobody completes has an effectiveness of 0, no matter how beautiful it looks on the page. This is not a physiology fact. It is an arithmetic fact about human beings, and it is stronger than any of the others. Now let me connect this to the nervous system, because there is a lovely reason why 5 minutes is not a compromise, but in a way close to ideal for the very thing we are trying to fix. Remember what we are chasing. We are not chasing endurance. The slow army has that covered, and a lifetime of walking to the mailbox keeps it in fair shape. What we are chasing is the recruitment of the fast fibers, and the strengthening of that quiet wire between the motor neuron and the muscle. And that particular job does not require you to be tired. It requires you to be loud. It requires, for a brief moment, a signal strong enough that the body says, ah, this is serious. I had better call up the reserves I have been letting sleep. Think of it like waking a household in an emergency. You do not need to shout for an hour. You need to shout once, clearly, and everyone comes running. The nervous system learns from intensity and from repetition far more than it learns from duration at a gentle level. A slow amble, held for a long time, is a soft, steady murmur. It never crosses the threshold where the fast fibers are summoned. But a movement that asks for real effort, even for a few seconds, even 8 or 10 times, crosses that threshold. It sends the loud signal. And once the signal has been sent, once the wire has carried its full voltage, the useful work of that moment is largely done. Piling on another 40 minutes of the same does not send a louder message. It mostly sends a longer one, and length is the thing the aging body has the least patience for. So the short session is not a watered-down version of the long one. For the specific problem of waking the fast army and retinning the wire, it is arguably the more sensible dose. You provide the loud signal, you let the body rest and rebuild, you come back tomorrow, and you provide it again. The repetition across days is where the strength is actually built, not the heroic length of any single afternoon. And a 5-minute thing you do every single day gives you, across a week, more of those loud signals, spaced more sensibly, than a 45-minute ordeal you manage twice before your resolve gives out. Now I told you I would take you through the 5 little movements themselves, one at a time, and treat each one as what it truly is, which is a small machine designed to solve a specific mechanical problem in an aging leg. And I want to do that slowly, because each one hides more cleverness than it lets on. Let me begin with the first, which the physical therapist Dr. Trackman places at the very front of her routine, and which I think is the single most honest exercise a person past 70 can do. It is the sit to stand. You take an ordinary chair. You sit. You stand. You sit again. 8 to 10 times. That is the whole thing. It looks like nothing. It looks like the most ordinary motion of a human day, which is exactly why it is so valuable. Consider what rising from a chair actually demands. You are asking your legs to take the entire weight of your trunk, your arms, your head, everything above the hips, and lift it from a dead stop against gravity. There is no momentum to help you. There is no swing. It is a pure, cold standing start, and it falls almost entirely on the quadriceps at the front of the thigh and the glutes behind the hip, which are the two largest muscles in the whole lower body. These are also, and this is no accident, among the muscles that aging erodes the fastest, because they are rich in exactly the fast twitch tissue we have been mourning this whole talk. So the sit to stand does not merely exercise a big muscle. It drives over and over the precise movement pattern that decays first, using the precise fibers that vanish first. It is a needle threaded straight into the wound. And there is a beautiful practicality to it, which is that this is not some invented gymnasium motion with no bearing on real life. Rising from a chair is rising from a chair. It is also mechanically rising from the edge of a bed and pushing up off a low couch and the first half of climbing a stair. When you strengthen this one pattern, you are not buying a skill you will only use in the exercise itself. You are buying back a dozen ordinary moments of the day that have been quietly getting harder. The person who could not quite get out of the deep armchair without a hand and had begun without ever saying so to avoid deep armchairs gets that chair back. That is what this looks like from the inside. Not a fitness score. A return freedom you had not fully admitted you were losing. Now let me give you the second movement, which trades the big muscles of the thigh for the small ones far below, down at the ankle. This is the heel raise. You stand behind a counter or beside a wall. You rest your fingertips on it lightly, just for balance, not to haul yourself up with your arms, and you rise onto the balls of your feet, lifting your heels off the floor, and then you lower them back down. 15 to 20 times. More repetitions than the sit to stand, because the calf is a muscle built for many small efforts rather than a few enormous ones, and it likes to be spoken to in its own language. You might wonder why we bother with the calf at all when the great drama of falling seems to happen up at the hip. But the calf and the ankle are where standing quietly actually lives. Every moment you are on your feet, even perfectly still, you are not truly still. You are swaying, a tiny amount, forward and back, and it is the calf muscles and the small stabilizers around the ankle that catch each little sway and return you to center, hundreds of times a minute, entirely beneath your notice. This is the fine, constant, invisible work of not falling over, and it runs on those ankle muscles. When they weaken, the sway grows a little wider before it is caught, and the person begins to feel, vaguely, unsteady, without being able to say why. Strengthening the heel raise is tuning the smallest correction, the one that keeps a wobble from ever becoming a lean. And notice again how the design respects the body it is meant for. The fingertips on the counter are not cheating. They are a deliberate, graded amount of help, a training wheel you can lean on more at first and less as you grow stronger, so that a person who is genuinely afraid of tipping can still begin, today, without waiting to be brave. That is the mark of a routine built by someone who has actually stood in a room with a frightened 80-year-old, and not merely drawn one on a chart. Every choice in it is an act of meeting the person where they are, and we still have 3 movements left to lay open: the wall push-up, the standing march, and the small backward reach of the toe tap. Each one solving its own quiet problem, and I want to give them the same unhurried attention, because the whole argument of this long night comes to rest, in the end, on these small and unglamorous things. So let us take up the wall push-up, and I want you to notice first how strange it is that a routine built for the legs contains a movement for the arms and the chest at all. A person could be forgiven for thinking someone made a mistake, that this exercise wandered in from a different list. But there is no mistake. Think about what a body actually does in the half second after it begins to fall forward. The legs have already failed, or they would not be falling. What comes next is the hands. The hands fly out toward the wall, toward the counter, toward the floor, and they must not simply touch that surface. They must catch it, and hold, and push back, and they must do all of this against the full weight of a torso arriving with momentum. A person with soft, unpracticed arms puts the hands out, and the arms simply fold, and the face meets the thing the hands were supposed to stop. So this quiet movement, Standing on arm's length from a wall and lowering the chest toward it and pressing away is not really about the chest at all. It is rehearsal for the last line of defense. It teaches the shoulders and the arms to accept the load arriving suddenly and to answer it with a push instead of a collapse. And here is the gentle intelligence of doing it against a wall rather than on the floor. On the floor, the load is nearly the whole body, far too much for most people we are talking about, and the failure would come in the very first repetition. On the wall, you set the load yourself simply by how far your feet stand back. Step in close, the work is light. Step back, the work grows. The wall becomes a dial, and the person turns it, and no one has to be strong before they are allowed to begin. 8 to 10 of these, done slowly, done with control, and the arms quietly learn a job they may be called upon to do only once in a year, but on that one day it will be the most important job in the world. Now the fourth movement asks something the first three did not, and I find it the most beautiful of the 5 for exactly that reason. The standing march. You stand, and you lift one knee, and you set it down, and you lift the other. 30 to 45 seconds of this slow, deliberate lifting, as though you were walking to somewhere without ever leaving the spot. And a person watching might say, well, now you have simply invented walking again, after spending all this time telling me walking was not enough. But look closer, because the thing that matters here is not the lifting of the knee. It is the standing on the other leg while you do it. For that whole moment, brief as it is, the entire weight of the body is balanced on one foot, and every small muscle around that ankle, around that hip, is firing and correcting and firing again to keep the tower from tipping. Ordinary walking never asks for this. In a real step, your weight is on one foot for only a flicker before it rolls forward onto the next, and the body is always, in a sense, falling into the following step and catching itself by moving on. The march freezes that flicker. It holds you in the single leg moment and says, stay here, balance here, do not escape by taking the next step. That is a demand the nervous system almost never receives in ordinary life, and it is precisely the demand that a narrow doorway, a curb in the dark, a wet tile makes on a body without warning. You are teaching the leg to be a stable pillar all by itself, and you are teaching the little muscles of the hip, the ones that keep you from listing to the side, to wake up and do their work. Remember what we said about the sideways fall, the lateral tip that breaks the hip. The muscles that guard against exactly that are the ones this humble marching, this walking to nowhere, quietly trains. And then the last of the 5, the step back toe tap, which looks like almost nothing at all, and which is doing something rather deep. You stand, and you reach one foot backward, and you touch the toe lightly to the floor behind you, and you bring it home, and you do the other side. 30 to 45 seconds of this small reaching. Now, why backward? Because backward is the direction the body trusts least. We spend our lives moving forward, and our eyes point forward, and our balance is tuned to the world we can see. Reach a foot behind you and you have sent a limb out into territory you cannot watch, and to keep from toppling, the standing leg and the whole trunk must hold firm, while a part of you explores the blind space at your back. This is control at the edge of the base, at the very boundary of where a person can stay upright, and it is trained so rarely that most people, asked to do it for the first time, feel a genuine flicker of alarm, a small honest fear, and that fear is information. It is the nervous system reporting that here, in this direction, it has grown weak and uncertain. And the tap trains exactly there. It widens the region in which the body knows it can move without falling. Think of your stable zone as a small lit circle you stand inside, and every one of these backward reaches pushes the edge of that circle a little farther out, so that the ordinary stumbles of a day, the missed step, the unexpected reach, land inside the lit part instead of out beyond it in the dark. So look at what this doctor has actually assembled, when you lay the 5 of them side by side. The sit to stand rebuilds the raw power to rise and drives the largest muscles of the leg through the very pattern that aging strips first. The heel raise arms the calf and the ankle, the fine steering muscles of every step. The wall push-up prepares the hands and arms for the catch of last resort. The standing march teaches the leg to hold you up alone, and the toe tap extends the very boundary of where you can safely stand. Not one of these is walking. Every one of them reaches for something walking cannot touch. And notice, above all, the discipline of the thing, the refusal to ask for more than a person will actually give. Start with 1 round, she says, and only later, when it feels easy, add a second. 1 round is 5 to 7 minutes. 2 rounds might be 12. There is no gym in it, no barbell, no floor to lower yourself onto and struggle to rise from, nothing to buy, nothing to schedule, nothing to be brave enough for. A chair, a wall, a stretch of floor no wider than your own 2 arms. And yet inside that plain little sequence is a targeted answer to the exact cellular failure we spent this long night uncovering. The quiet disappearance of the fast fibers, the fading of power, the loss of the sudden hard contraction that stands between a stumble and a fall. And I want to sit for a moment with a number that ought to give any honest person pause, because it tells you that the smallness of this routine is not a compromise, but very nearly the whole point. When brief resistance work of this kind was actually put to the test, only about 12 minutes at a time, twice a week, on a handful of simple machines, the strength gains were not small at all. Leg pressing strength climbed by something near 38% in the men and close to 59% in the women, over just 12 to 19 weeks. Now I have to be fair with you, because I promised at the start of this whole talk that I would be, and the people in that particular study had a middle age nearer 55 than 70, so I will not pretend the numbers land identically in an older body. But the shape of the finding stands, and the shape is what matters here. The muscle does not require an hour of suffering to change. It requires the right signal, delivered with enough intensity to be heard and repeated. A short, honest effort that genuinely challenges the fiber will remodel it. A long, gentle effort that never challenges it will not, however many miles it covers. The muscle is not counting your minutes. It is listening for a demand loud enough to answer, which brings us to the strangest and most human part of the whole business, and it is a part I did not expect to matter as much as it does. Because you can have the perfect routine, mechanically flawless, aimed precisely at the failing fibers, and it is worth exactly nothing if the person will not do it. And here the great obstacle has never really been the body. It has been the will, the ordinary human reluctance to do a thing that is dull, or hard, or long. So somebody had the good sense to simply ask older people what they would actually be willing to do, and the answer, when it came, was almost startling in its clarity, and I want to walk you through it slowly, because it changes how you should think about every long and virtuous exercise program ever prescribed to a person who was never going to do it. Picture the question they put to these people, 611 of them, all past the age of 65, scattered across the whole country. They laid out 2 paths. Down the first path, you go to a proper program, the kind a trainer would design, 45 minutes of work, 3 days in every week. It is a good program. It would do you real good. Down the second path, you do almost nothing by comparison. 5 minutes. But every day. And then they simply asked, which one would you actually choose? Now, if you believe that people are governed by what is good for them, you would expect the votes to scatter or maybe lean toward the bigger program, since everyone knows more is better. That is not what happened. Better than 2 out of every 3, 68 and a fraction%, reached for the small daily thing. Only about a third wanted the long virtuous program. More than 2 to 1 in favor of the little routine that a sensible expert might have dismissed as barely worth the trouble. And I want you to sit with that number for a moment, because it is telling you something the muscle physiology alone can never tell you. It is telling you about the shape of a human day. It is telling you that a thing you will do beats a better thing you will skip every single time, because the better thing does 0 work while it sits undone. A perfect program performed never is just a piece of paper. A humble program performed daily is a slow, steady hand rebuilding the fibers we have been talking about all night. But the part that truly stopped me, the part I keep turning over, is what happened when they looked at the people who were already in trouble. Take the folks who said they had difficulty walking. You would think, wouldn't you, that these are exactly the people who most need the full program, and so perhaps they would rise to it, grit their teeth, sign up for the long haul. The opposite. Among those with trouble walking, the preference for the short daily routine did not just hold, it swelled. It climbed to better than 5 to 1. Something near 87 of every 100 of them chose the 5 minutes. The very people whose failing legs we have spent this whole talk worrying about are the ones who most emphatically will not lace up for the long march. They are voting with perfect honesty for the only thing they can imagine themselves actually doing. So now you see the trap that the walking gospel and the gymnasium gospel both fall into, and they fall into it from opposite directions. Both of them are prescribing an amount of time. Both are saying, give me your minutes, give me many of them, give me them often. And the human being on the other end of that prescription is quietly calculating whether those minutes exist in the life they actually live, and very often deciding they do not, and then doing nothing at all. Nothing at all is the enemy. Nothing at all is where the fibers wither in the dark. Against nothing at all, 5 honest minutes is not a compromise. It is a landslide victory. And here is where the physiology and the psychology finally shake hands, and it is a lovely thing to watch, because they turn out to want the same answer. Remember what the fast fibers are asking for. They are not asking for duration. They never were. They are asking for a demand that is loud and sharp and true, a signal from the nerve strong enough to call the whole regiment up out of its bunks. You do not need an hour to send a loud signal. You need only a few repetitions of something genuinely hard, something that makes the muscle work near the edge of what it can do, and then you can stop, because the message has been delivered. The nervous system got the telegram. The long, slow stroll, whatever else its virtues, sends a whisper for 30 minutes. The short, sharp routine sends a shout for 5. And the fibers we are trying to save are deaf to whispers and wide awake to shouts. Do you see how neatly it fits together? The thing people will actually do, the small daily thing, happens to be the very thing the fast fibers were begging for all along. Nature does not usually gift us a coincidence that's convenient. Usually the good-for-you thing and the will-do-it thing are at war, and the good-for-you thing loses. But here, in this one corner of human aging, they line up. The dose the body needs is small. The dose the person will accept is small. They are the same small dose, and almost nobody is taking it, because we have all been told, gently and endlessly, that the answer is to walk, and to walk more, and to walk longer, and to feel a little guilty that we are not walking still more. Let me put a hard number against the softness of all this preference talk, so you do not think we are merely surveying feelings. Take a group of people, 30 odd of them, and give them the brief kind of resistance work, only about 12 minutes at a sitting, and only twice in a week. A trivial imposition on a life. Then wait. Not long, somewhere between 12 and 19 weeks, call it 3 or 4 months. And measure the strength of the legs on the pressing machine. In the men it rose by something near 38%. In the women by 59%. Let me say that again slowly, because it is the kind of figure that ought to make you sit up even at this drowsy hour. A woman doing 12 minutes, twice a week, for a season walked away with legs that pushed nearly 60% harder than the legs she started with. Now I owe you an honesty here. The same honesty I have tried to keep all night. Those particular people averaged around 55 years, not 70. So I will not pretend the exact numbers transfer without change to a body 2 decades older. They will be gentler in an older frame, slower to arrive, smaller in size. But the direction does not reverse. The machinery still answers the demand. It answers less loudly, and so it needs you to keep asking, which is precisely why the small daily habit beats the grand occasional gesture. The younger body forgives a program you half abandon. The older body needs the one you will keep. And this, I think, dissolves the false fight the whole title picks. Stop the long walks, it says, as if walking had done you some wrong. Walking has done you no wrong. Walking is a fine and pleasant thing, and it keeps the heart supple and the slow fibers content, and the mind clear. And we saw, did we not, that at high enough doses it even guards against falling in ways that shame the strength work on its own numbers. I would never take the morning walk away from the schoolteacher I began with, but I would slip something into her morning that she does not yet have. I would ask her before or after the walk to give 5 honest minutes to the fibers the walk cannot reach, to stand up from her chair and sit down again, slowly, with control, 8 or 10 times, until the big muscles of the thigh and the seat feel the work. To rise up onto the balls of her feet and lower down again 15 or 20 times with a light hand resting on the counter, waking the calves and the small stabilizing muscles that steer the ankle, not instead of the walk. Alongside it, the walk for the heart and the head, the 5 minutes for the fast fibers and the wiring that fires them, because when you frame it as walking against strength, you have already lost the plot. The body did not evolve two fiber armies so that we could choose one and dismiss the other. It built the slow army for the long patient work of staying upright through an ordinary day, and it built the fast army for the sudden emergency. The trip, the lurch, the catch. A life needs both armies drilled. Walking drills the first and lets the second rust. 5 minutes of resistance drills the second and lets you keep the first from your walk. Put them together and you have covered the whole territory of what an aging leg is asked to do. The long haul and the split second both. So let us go back down to the fibers one last time before this night is through, because I have been circling something and I want to name it plainly. Everything we have said tonight comes to rest on a single quiet idea, and the idea is this. Aging is not one thing happening to the body. It is many different things, moving at many different speeds, and the mistake we make, the honest and understandable mistake, is to fight all of them with one weapon. We picked walking, and we swung it at everything, and it did beautiful work against the things it could reach, and it swung clean through the fast fibers as if they were smoke, and we never noticed the miss. Because the fast fibers do not complain when they shrink. They shrink in silence. They ask for nothing. And then one ordinary afternoon, on an ordinary rug, they are asked for everything, in a window of time too short to name, and there is less of them there than there used to be. And so the answer is not to throw the weapon away. I want to be very clear about that, because it would be the easiest thing in the world to walk out of tonight thinking I have told you to stop walking, and I have told you no such thing. Walking is a lovely thing. It reaches the heart, it reaches the slow fibers, it reaches the mood, it reaches the quiet machinery of the blood, and there is that stubborn number from the women in their 80s and their 90s, more than 4 hours of it a week folded into a life, and a full risk cut by nearly 2/3. You do not argue with a number like that. You make room for it. What I am asking you to do is smaller and stranger than quitting anything. I am asking you to add one weapon that reaches the one place the walking cannot go. 5 minutes of it. That is the whole revolution. Not more hours. A different kind of minute. Let me take you through those minutes the way I would take apart any machine that interested me, one piece at a time, asking of each piece the only question worth asking, which is, what is this actually for? The physical therapist who assembled this little routine, Dr. Trackman, a specialist in the mechanics of the body, put 5 movements in a row, and I have looked at them the way I would look at 5 gears, and I promise you not one of them is decoration. The first is the simplest thing you have ever been told to do, and the most quietly ferocious. You sit in a chair, and you stand up, and you sit down, and you do it 8 or 10 times. That is all. And you are tempted to laugh, because you have been standing up from chairs since before you could speak, and where is the exercise in that? But watch what the movement actually is. To rise from a chair you must, in a single smooth push, ask the big muscles on the front of your thigh and the big muscles across your seat, the quadriceps and the glutes, the largest engines in the whole lower body, to lift the entire weight of you from stillness into motion. That is a load. That is real load. And it is load applied to precisely the pattern that aging erodes first and fastest, the pattern of getting up. Every time you stand, you send a signal loud enough to reach the fast fibers, the ones the walk left sleeping. You are not practicing a trick. You are ringing a bell in the exact room where nobody has rung a bell in years. The second movement is the heel raise. You stand near a wall or a kitchen counter, you rest your fingertips on it lightly, just for the balance, not for the lift, and you rise up onto the balls of your feet, and you come down, and you do that 15 or 20 times. Now this one goes to the calves, and to the ankles, and to all the little unnamed stabilizing muscles that live down there in the foot and the lower leg. And you might think the calf is a humble muscle, a small thing, but consider where it sits. It sits at the very hinge where your body meets the ground. Every correction you ever make when you sway, every tiny invisible adjustment that keeps you standing upright while you think you are simply standing still, passes through that ankle and through that calf. When those go quiet, you sway wider before you catch yourself, and the catch comes later, and later is the whole problem. So you rise onto your toes 20 times, and you are reawakening the muscle that argues with gravity all day long on your behalf. The third is a wall push-up. You face a wall, you place your hands on it a little wider than your shoulders, you let your body tip in toward the wall, and you push yourself back out 8 or 10 times. And now you may say to me, Feynman, this is a lecture about legs, about falling, about the fast fibers in the thigh. Why on earth are we pushing on a wall with our arms? And it is a fair question, and it has a beautiful answer. When you fall, you do not fall with your legs alone. You fall with your whole self, and the arms are the second line of defense, the thing you throw out in front of you or off to the side when the legs have already lost the argument. The muscles of the chest and the shoulders and the arms that fire in that instant are made of the same two kinds of fiber, and the fast ones in the arm shrink in the same silence as the fast ones in the leg. The wall push-up is gentle. It is a fraction of the load of a real push-up on the floor, but it is load where there was none, aimed at the muscles that break your fall when the fall has already begun. The fourth movement asks you to march in place while standing, lifting one knee and then the other for 30 to 45 seconds. And here the thing being trained is not raw strength at all. It is balance under motion. It is the ability to stand on one leg, even for the half a second that a marching step requires, and not tip over. Because look closely at walking, real walking, and you will see that it is nothing but a long chain of moments where you are balanced on a single foot. We forget this. We think of walking as a two-footed thing. But at speed, in each stride there is an instant where only one foot owns the ground and the other is swinging through the air, and in that instant your entire body is a tower balanced on one small base. The standing march rehearses that instant on purpose, slowly, where you can feel it, so that when it comes at you unrehearsed on a curb or a stair, your body already knows the shape of it. The fifth and last is a step-back toe tap, 30 to 45 seconds of it, where you reach one foot back behind you, tap the toe to the floor, and bring it home, and then the other. And this one trains the body in a direction we almost never train it. Backward and to the side. Think about how you have moved your whole life. Forward. Always forward. Toward the door, toward the table, toward the person you are walking to meet. Almost every step you have ever taken has been a step ahead. But the falls do not come from the front. Remember that grim little fact from earlier in the night? That more than 19 out of every 20 broken hips in older people come from falling sideways. Sideways. The one direction we never practice. The step-back toe tap begins to teach the body to be strong and sure in the directions life will actually test it. The backward stumble, the sideways lurch, the reach into space behind you that a younger body made without a thought. 5 movements. One round of them takes about 5 to 7 minutes, and Dr. Trackman says begin with a single round, and when that round grows easy, and it will grow easy sooner than you expect, add a second one. That is the entire prescription, and I want you to notice something about it that is almost a magic trick, though it is only physiology wearing the costume of magic. In these 5 minutes you have touched the quadriceps and the glutes, the calves and the ankles, the chest and the shoulders, the balance system, and the muscles of sideways and backward motion. You have, in other words, gone straight to the fast fibers in the front of the thigh, in the seat, in the calf, in the arm, and you have asked them, in a language loud enough for them to hear, to please stay. The walk never said please. The walk never spoke their language at all. It was too gentle, too even, too kind. And these fibers, it turns out, do not answer to kindness. They answer to demand. Now you might still be sitting there, half asleep I hope, with one small stubborn objection floating up. 5 minutes cannot be enough. Surely the good things take an hour. Surely the medicine that works must taste of effort and sweat and a great expanse of time. It is one of the oldest instincts we have that more must be better, that the longer road must lead somewhere finer. But the fast fibers do not read the clock. What they read is the size of the signal. And a signal that is large and brief will reach them, while a signal that is small and endless will not, no matter how many hours you pour into it. This is why a person can lift a genuine load for a matter of minutes, a couple of times in a week, and watch real strength come back into their legs, strength you can measure with instruments over a span of a few months. The muscle was never waiting for more time. It was waiting for a big enough ask. And there is one more thing that the shortness buys you. Something that has nothing to do with fibers at all and everything to do with the plain and human truth of what people will and will not actually do. Because the finest exercise in the world, the one perfectly designed to reach every failing fiber, is worth exactly nothing if it lives only on a page and never in a life. And here is where the shortness stops being a compromise and becomes the whole secret. When they asked hundreds of older people in this country to choose between the long, proper, sweat-soaked program and a small daily handful of minutes, the answer was not close, and I want to sit with that answer for a while, because it is where the physics of the muscle finally shakes hands with the physics of the person. They asked 611 older people, all past the age of 65, and they laid before them a plain and honest fork in the road. Down one path was the program a physiologist would draw up if nobody ever got tired and nobody ever got bored. 45 minutes at a stretch, 3 days out of every week. The kind of thing that fills a gymnasium and a good intention in equal measure. Down the other path was almost nothing at all. 5 minutes. Every day. That was the whole offer. And when the answers came back, more than 2 out of every 3, 68.4% of them, reached for the small daily handful and let the grand program go. Only about a third, 31.6%, wanted the long and proper thing. That is better than 2 to 1 in favor of the little routine, and the mathematicians who checked it told us the gap was no accident of the crowd. It was real. Now I could leave it there and let you think people are simply lazy, that they took the easy road because the easy road is easy. But that is a shallow reading, and it hides the deeper thing, and the deeper thing is what I want to turn over in the quiet here. Look at what happened when they narrowed their gaze to the people who were already having trouble getting around. The very ones whose fast fibers had thinned the most. The ones who most needed to reach that failing army in the leg. Among those people, the preference did not shrink. It grew. It grew until it was more than 5 to 1, 5.3 times as many choosing the short road, until nearly 87 of every 100 of them wanted the 5 minutes and not the 45. The people in the greatest danger were the people who most wanted the smallest dose. And if you think about that for even a moment, it stops looking like laziness and starts looking like wisdom. The ordinary, quiet wisdom of a body that knows its own limits better than any chart does. Because here is the arithmetic that no muscle fiber will ever show you under a microscope. The arithmetic of a real week in a real life. A program you will not do reaches 0 fibers. It recruits nothing. It strengthens no wire between the nerve and the muscle. On paper it is magnificent, and in the body it is a rumor. And we have the sad proof of this sitting right in the numbers for this whole country, because fewer than 1 in 5 older adults, fewer than 20%, ever manage to meet the gentle guideline of lifting something heavy even twice in a week. 20%. That means 80 out of every 100 people who could be reaching their fast fibers are not reaching them at all, and the exercise that would have saved those fibers is doing precisely as much good as a locked door. So when a plain daily 5 minutes pulls people in where the grand plan pushed them away, that is not a lesser medicine. That is the only medicine that actually gets swallowed. I find something almost tender in this if you will let an old man use that word about a survey. We spend so much effort designing the perfect thing, the optimal thing, the thing that would win every argument in the laboratory, and we forget to ask the one question that decides everything, which is whether a tired person on a gray morning will really rise from the chair and do it. A dose you take beats a dose you admire. The half-open door you walk through beats the golden gate you stand outside of. And the beautiful accident hidden in all this is that for the aging leg, the small dose and the willing dose turn out to be the very same dose. The physics wanted intensity, not duration. The person wanted brevity, not sacrifice. And those two wishes, which sound like they ought to fight, lie down together like old friends. 5 minutes is long enough to shout at the fast fibers and short enough that a human being will keep answering the call, day after day, week after week, which is the only time scale on which a muscle ever actually rebuilds itself. Now let me sit for a moment longer with why the daily part matters, because I glossed it and it deserves its own small light. The muscle does not grow while you are working it. That is one of those upside-down truths that surprises people the first time they hear it. You do not build the leg during the 5 minutes. During the 5 minutes, you only send the message, you only ring the bell, you only tell the nervous system that a bigger, quicker force is being demanded of this body and had better be ready next time. The building happens afterward, in the hours of rest, in the ordinary business of the body repairing what you asked it to strain. So the routine is not really a session. It is a conversation. And a conversation held every day in small, honest sentences teaches far more than one long speech shouted once a week and then forgotten. This is why the humble 5 minutes, repeated, can quietly out-teach the grand 45 that shows up rarely and leaves the wire cold in between. And I want to be fair, scrupulously fair, because I promised you at the start that I would respect the walking even while I dismantled its throne, and I have not forgotten that promise now that the argument has turned. The walk is not the villain of this story. It never was. The walk carries the heart and the lungs and the long, slow fibers that hold you upright through a long, slow day. The walk clears the mind and warms the blood and does 100 good things I have not even named. If anything, the honest verdict is not that you should stop walking. It is that walking was only ever half of an answer that everyone mistook for the whole answer, and the missing half is not more minutes of the same thing. The missing half is a different kind of asking altogether, a louder and briefer kind. The kind that finally reaches the army the gentle stroll marches straight past. So let us finally walk into the 5 minutes themselves, slowly, the way you would examine any fine machine, one part at a time. Because each of these small movements is not an exercise so much as a targeted repair aimed at a particular cellular deficit we have spent this whole evening uncovering. There is a physical therapist, a doctor of physical therapy named Devin Trackman, who has laid out a foundational routine of 5 movements that runs only about 5 to 7 minutes, and I want to take her 5 and show you that each one is a small piece of physics disguised as a household chore. The first is the one I keep circling back to, the sit to stand 8 to 10 times, and by now you know exactly why it sits at the front of the line. To rise from a chair is to produce force multiplied by speed against the pull of the whole earth, using the quadriceps at the front of the thigh and the glutes underneath you, the two largest muscles in the lower body, the very muscles aging erodes the fastest, and the very pattern you will need 10,000 more times before you are done living. Every time you stand up on purpose, slowly and with attention, you are drafting the fast fibers back into surface and rehearsing the exact motion that keeps you independent. It is the whole thesis of tonight folded into a single ordinary rising. The second is the heel raise, 15 to 20 of them, a light hand resting on a wall or a counter for balance, and here the work moves down to the calves and the ankles and all the small, quiet stabilizer muscles that no one thinks about until they fail. These are the muscles that fire in the instant your weight drifts too far forward, the ones that make the tiny constant corrections that keep standing from becoming falling. You rise onto the balls of your feet, you lower with control, and you are teaching the ankle to be strong and awake at the very joint where so many stumbles are either caught or lost. The third steps away from the legs for a breath, the wall push-up 8 to 10, your hands on the wall and your body leaning in and pressing back. And you might wonder why a leg and balance routine spends any of its precious 5 minutes on the arms and the chest. But think of what a body actually does in the half second of a real stumble. It reaches. It throws its hands toward the counter, the door frame, the wall, anything, and it must be able to push back against its own falling weight. The wall push-up is the gentle rehearsal of that catch, the upper body half of not going down, and a routine that trained only the legs and forgot the arms would have left the second hand of the rescue empty. The fourth is the standing march, 30 to 45 seconds of lifting one knee and then the other, and now we are practicing the single most exposed act in all of human movement, which is standing on one leg. Every step you take is for a flashing instant, a fall onto one foot that you catch with balance and timing. The march takes that instant and stretches it out and makes it deliberate, so the nervous system can drill the balance and the hip strength that ordinary walking uses but never openly trains. And the fifth and last, the step back toe tap, another 30 to 45 seconds, sends the weight backward and to the side, into exactly the directions where balance is thinnest and where, you will remember, more than 95 of every 100 broken hips begin in a sideways fall. She tells you to start with a single round of these 5 and, when it comes easily, to build to 2. That is the whole prescription. 5 small movements, 1 round growing into 2, a few minutes a day, each one aimed like a careful arrow at a weakness we can now name and see. And that little detail, that instruction to start with 1 round and grow into 2, is not a throwaway. It is the whole secret of why a short thing can beat a long thing. Let me show you what I mean, because there was a study that asked older people plainly what they would actually be willing to do. 611 adults, all past the age of 65, all across the country, were given a choice between 2 honest programs. One was the respectable textbook prescription, 45 minutes at a time, 3 days every week, the kind of thing a good trainer would write down and a good doctor would nod at. The other was almost embarrassing by comparison. 5 minutes. Every day. That was it. And when the answers came back, 68.4 out of every 100 chose the small one, the 5-minute one, over the grand and proper one. Only 31.6 chose the long program. More than 2 to 1 in favor of the thing that looks too small to matter. Now you could shrug at that. You could say, well, of course people pick the easy one. People are lazy. That tells us nothing about their legs. But wait a moment before you say it, because there is a sharper number hiding inside that survey, and it points exactly where our whole story has been pointing. When they pulled out only the people who already had trouble walking, the very people whose fast fibers have thinned the most, whose falls we have been worried about this entire time, the preference did not shrink. It grew. Among those folks, the ratio climbed to more than 5 to 1. 87 out of every 100 of them chose the 5-minute program. The people with the most to lose were the ones most drawn to the small door. And that is not laziness. That is a body speaking honestly about what it can sustain. Here is why that matters more than it seems. A program only works if you do it. That sounds so obvious it is almost silly to say out loud, and yet nearly every conversation about exercise forgets it entirely. We argue about which routine is optimal, which one moves the numbers most in the laboratory, as though the person were a machine that will faithfully execute whatever we prescribe. But a human being is not a machine. A human being is a creature of mornings that got away from them, of knees that ache, of 100 small frictions between the intention and the act. And the plain truth in this whole field is that fewer than 20 out of every 100 older adults in this country are doing any real resistance training twice a week, the way the guidelines ask. Fewer than 1 in 5, which means the beautiful optimal textbook program, the 45-minute one, is a program that 4 out of 5 people are simply not doing at all. Its effect on the muscles of the people who skip it is exactly 0. A perfect plan you abandon is worth less than a modest plan you keep. So think about the arithmetic of it. Not the arithmetic of a single session, but the arithmetic of a year. Picture 2 people. The first has the grand program, 45 minutes, 3 times a week, and like most honest human beings, she manages it for a while, and then life crowds in and she drifts, and by the 4th month, the shoes are by the door and the good intentions are in a drawer. The second person has 5 little movements, a few minutes, done most mornings by the kitchen counter while the water heats. He does not always feel like it. But it is so small that skipping it feels almost sillier than doing it, and so, most days, he does it. Roll that forward across a year, and the first person has a magnificent program she is no longer running, and the second person has an unimpressive program he is still running. And it is the second person whose motor neurons keep getting the signal, whose fast fibers keep being called to the front. The dose that reaches the muscle is the dose you actually take. Everything else is a story about what you meant to do. There is a real physiology under this, not just a lesson in willpower.